Somewhere in the world, hidden inside ancient stones, forgotten manuscripts and mysterious symbols, there is a language that no one can read. For centuries, historians, archaeologists, cryptographers, and linguists have tried to unlock its secrets. Entire careers have been spent searching for a breakthrough. Yet even today, the message remains silent. Who created it? What knowledge does it contain? And what if this undeciphered language is hiding a chapter of human history that was never meant to be forgotten? Tonight we journey into one of the greatest mysteries ever discovered, a language that has resisted every attempt to understand it. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're watching from. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's explore the mystery language no one can read. The first mark appears where silence should have erased everything. It is not a statue, not a wall, not the broken face of a king staring across a ruined courtyard. It is smaller than that, quieter than that, almost easy to miss beneath the dust of centuries, a line cut into clay, a hooked sign pressed beside another sign, a cluster of shapes that seems too deliberate to be decoration and too orderly to be accident. Someone once placed it there with a purpose. Someone knew what it meant. A hand moved across the surface, not randomly, not playfully, but with the confidence of a person using a system shared by others. Then the hand vanished. The voice vanished. The world that understood the marks fell away, leaving behind a message that still sits in plain sight, visible to modern eyes, and yet closed like a sealed room. Across the ancient world, these silent marks survive in places where human life was once dense with movement. They appear on fragments of pottery pulled from old settlement floors, on stone slabs, weathered by wind, on metal objects buried with the dead, on seals pressed into clay by people who expected someone else to recognize authority, ownership, value, or command. Some are deeply carved as if meant to last beyond a lifetime. Others are scratched quickly, perhaps by a trader, a worker, or a scribe handling ordinary business in a world that has become extraordinary only because it is gone. They are not all from one place or one age. The mystery of unreadable language is not a single locked door. It is a corridor of doors scattered across continents and centuries, each one leading into a different human world whose sounds have not survived. The most unsettling part is not that the marks exist. It is that they almost speak. A natural crack in stone does not invite interpretation. A stain on pottery does not seem to wait for a reader. But these signs do. They carry rhythm. They repeat, they change position. Some cluster at edges, some follow lines. Some appear in sequences short enough to resemble names or ownership marks, while others stretch long enough to suggest records, prayers, dedications, lists, or statements, whose structure still remains beyond reach. The eye senses intention before the mind can translate meaning. That is why undeciphered writing has such power. It stands at the border between presence and absence. It proves that someone wished to communicate while denying modern people the comfort of knowing what was said. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. The story ahead is not simply about strange symbols. It is about the fragile bridge between memory and oblivion, and about the strange fact that a civilization can leave behind words and still remain in one of the most important ways unheard. In many ancient discoveries there is at least some kind of surrender. A ruined palace can still reveal its layout. A burial can still suggest rank, ritual, diet, disease, or belief. Tools can show how hands worked. Bones can show age, injury, migration, and sometimes even ancestry. Charred seeds can show what fields once grew. Even a collapsed wall can speak in the language of materials and pressure. But writing is different. Writing promises something more direct. It suggests thought shaped into signs. It suggests memory made portable. It suggests that a person long dead may still reach across time with a specific message. When that writing cannot be read, the disappointment is sharper because the promise is greater. Some undeciphered scripts are famous enough to have become almost legendary. Others remain known mostly to specialists who spend years measuring signs, counting repetitions, comparing fragments, and trying not to see patterns where none exist. A few are preserved in large enough quantities to tempt confidence. Others survive in maddeningly small scraps, as if history allowed only the corner of a page to escape the fire. In each case, the central problem is the same. The artifact has survived, but the living chain of understanding has broken. The signs remain, yet the readers are gone. A script can outlast a city, a kingdom, even a language, but without the right key it becomes an artifact of thought rather than thought itself. The scenes of discovery often feel deceptively simple. A worker clears soil from a tablet. An archaeologist turns over a shard. A museum curator examines a seal impression in better light. A photographer captures markings too faint for the naked eye. The object may be small enough to fit in one hand, but it carries the weight of a vanished system. It may have passed through markets, archives, temples, workshops, or tombs before reaching the ground. It may have been handled by people who never imagined that future scholars would struggle to decide whether its signs record a name, a number, a title, a prayer, or nothing linguistic at all. What survives in the record suggests intention, but intention alone is not translation. This is where the mystery becomes more difficult than it first appears. To read an ancient language, scholars need more than a sharp photograph and patience. They need repeated examples. They need context. They need to know where one word ends and another begins, whether the signs represent sounds, syllables, whole words, ideas, numbers, or some mixture of these. They need to know the direction of reading. They need names that can be recognized across languages. They need related tongues, bilingual texts, living descendants, or long administrative archives where patterns become visible through repetition. Without enough of these clues, even a clear inscription can remain as sealed as if it had never been found. Yet the silence is not empty. Around the unreadable marks, the ancient world still leaves traces. The clay may reveal firing temperatures. The stone may reveal quarry sources. The object's location may reveal whether it belonged to a household, a palace, a tomb, a harbour, or a sanctuary. Nearby bones, seeds, tools, ceramics, pigments, and architecture can build a world around the text, even when the text itself refuses to open. Archaeology can show that people traded across long distances, stored grain, buried their dead, with care worshipped, fought, migrated, adapted to drought, rebuilt after disaster, or collapsed under pressures no single explanation fully accounts for. But the unreadable signs remain at the centre, like a covered face in a crowded room. There is also a human unease in the idea that literacy itself can disappear. Modern life often treats writing as permanent, as if words stored somewhere will always be recoverable. Ancient history proves otherwise. Archives burn, languages change, empires fall. Scripts are abandoned when new rulers arrive, when trade routes shift, when religious systems transform, when schools of scribes vanish, or when communities are absorbed into larger cultures. A writing system can be perfectly useful for centuries and then become useless in a single historical turning. Once children are no longer trained to read it, once officials no longer demand it, once rituals no longer require it, the chain weakens. After enough generations, even descendants of the people who created the signs may stand before them as strangers. That loss gives every undeciphered script a double nature. It is evidence of sophistication because writing rarely appears without social need. But it is also evidence of rupture because the ability to read did not continue into the present. Somewhere between the making of the object and its rediscovery, a human connection failed. The failure may have been gradual, almost invisible at the time. It may have come through conquest, economic decline, environmental stress migration, or the slow replacement of one administrative habit by another. Scholars still debate the exact causes in many cases, and the evidence remains incomplete. But the result is visible on the artifact itself. The signs remain organized. The meaning has gone dark. This darkness is not the same as total ignorance. It is more complicated and in some ways more haunting. A completely unknown object might be admired for its beauty, or measured for its age, but an unreadable inscription demands response. It invites experts to test hypotheses, to compare sign lists, to search for repeated endings, to wonder whether a short sequence might be a royal name, a place, a commodity, a god, or a number. It also invites the public imagination, sometimes carefully, sometimes recklessly. Popular stories often rush into the silence with claims of lost continents, secret wisdom, or impossible visitors. Serious study moves more slowly. It accepts that mystery is not permission to invent. It treats each mark as evidence, first temptation second. Standing before such an inscription, the modern viewer is placed in an uncomfortable position. The ancient person who made it may have expected the message to be obvious. The signs may have once been as ordinary as a label on a jar, a receipt for grain, a name on a seal, or a dedication placed before a deity. Its mystery may come not from its original purpose, but from the accident of survival without context. That is one of history's driest jokes. A message does not need to be profound to become mysterious. It only needs to outlive the world that made it readable. And so the story begins not with a grand monument, but with small deliberate marks that refuse to become words. They sit on clay, stone, bone, metal, and painted surfaces scattered through ruined landscapes and museum drawers, holding the shape of communication without surrendering its content. They remind scholars that history is not simply what happened, but what can still be recovered from what happened. They remind everyone else that human memory is more fragile than it seems. A civilization may build trade, worship, count, rule, bury and record, and still leave behind a sentence no one can read. The silence begins there inside the narrow space between a visible sign and a vanished voice. Writing changes the weight of a human life because it allows memory to leave the body. Before a mark becomes a word, before a tablet becomes an archive, before a seal becomes proof of ownership or command, memory lives mostly in voices, habits, rituals, paths, gestures, songs, and repeated acts. A community knows where to plant because elders remember the rain. A family knows it's dead because names are spoken at the right moments. A trader knows a debt because both sides recognize the obligation. A ruler holds power because people gather, listen, obey, and remember. This kind of memory can be strong, but it is also vulnerable. It needs living carriers. It depends on breath, trust, repetition, and presence. When writing appears, something in that balance changes. Thought can now be fixed outside the mind. Authority can travel without the body of the person who gives it. A name can survive after the mouth that spoke it has turned to dust. That transformation does not happen all at once, and it does not happen everywhere for the same reasons. In some ancient societies, writing emerges from the needs of accounting, from the pressure of counting grain animals, labor land or goods moving through temple and palace systems. In others, it is tied to ritual, prestige, political identity, sacred performance, or the marking of important objects. Some early signs may not record full speech at all, but categories, quantities, ownership or repeated formulas understood by a trained group. The path from mark to script, from script to fluent writing, is rarely simple. Scholars still debate how certain systems cross that threshold, and the evidence remains incomplete because the earliest experiments are often made on perishable materials that disappear long before archaeology can find them. Yet even when writing begins in practical work, it quickly becomes more than a tool for storage. It changes how power looks. A clay seal on a jar can carry authority across distance. A tablet can hold an order without needing the ruler to stand there in person. A boundary stone can turn landscape into law. A tomb inscription can extend status into death. A list can make people animals, workers, fields debts, or offerings part of an ordered world. The written mark creates a new kind of witness, one that does not tire, forget, or change its story in the ordinary way. It can be moved, copied, stored, displayed, hidden, or destroyed. In that sense, writing is never only language, it is also an instrument of trust and control. This is why unreadable writing is so unsettling. It is not merely that modern scholars cannot hear an ancient sound. It is that a whole system of memory and authority has been cut off from its meaning. The object still performs the outer shape of its old function. A tablet still looks like a record. A seal still looks like a guarantee. A carved stone still looks like a statement meant to endure. But the specific human arrangement behind it has faded. The grain counted on the tablet has vanished. The official who pressed the seal is gone. The ruler who wanted a name preserved may have been forgotten, except for the marks that no one can confidently pronounce. The text remains, but the social machinery that gave it force has fallen silent. The first societies to use writing do not necessarily write everything down. This is an important detail often hidden by the survival of famous archives. Writing begins as selective memory. It preserves what certain people believe must be fixed. Transactions, offerings, names, titles, rituals, ownership, tribute, astronomical observations, legal decisions or royal claims. Much of ordinary life remains unwritten. The smell of cooking fires, the tired hands of harvest workers, the private grief of parents, the jokes exchanged in workshops, the hesitation before migration, and the fear during drought usually pass without inscription. Even literate societies are surrounded by vast unwritten worlds. What survives in the record suggests priorities, not completeness. This means that a lost script may represent only a narrow window into a much larger civilization. If the surviving signs come mostly from seals, they may reflect administration or identity more than storytelling. If they come from ritual objects, they may preserve sacred formulas rather than common speech. If they appear on trade goods, they may reveal movement and exchange, but little about family life. If they are found in tombs, they may speak to rank ancestry or the afterlife. Without decipherment, even these categories remain uncertain. No single explanation fully accounts for every mysterious sign system, because writing is not one invention repeated in identical form. It is a family of solutions to the problem of human memory. In the ancient world, the ability to write often belongs to specialists. This is one reason a script can die even when people survive. If only a small class of scribes, priests, officials, merchants, or artisans knows the system, then literacy is not evenly spread through society. It lives inside training institutions, routines, and inherited roles. A child may spend years learning how signs work, which forms are proper, what numbers mean, how commodities are listed, how names are marked, and what mistakes are unacceptable. That knowledge can seem stable while the institutions supporting it remain strong. But when a palace collapses, a temple loses authority, trade routes shift, or a conquering administration imposes a different language, the training system can break quickly. People may continue speaking a descendant language for generations, while the older script becomes irrelevant, prestigious, sacred, or simply forgotten. There is a lesser-known kind of fragility hidden here. A writing system may not disappear because it fails, but because a more useful or more powerful one replaces it. Scripts can be abandoned through success as much as disaster. A merchant may adopt a widely understood script because it opens trade. A ruler may use another language because it carries imperial authority. A religious community may preserve one script for sacred purposes, while everyday writing moves elsewhere. Over time, the old signs become ceremonial, then antiquarian, then obscure. To later observers, the change may look like a collapse, but in lived experience it may have felt like adaptation. The evidence remains incomplete in many cases, because the people making such changes rarely pause to explain that they are leaving future centuries a puzzle. Writing also changes the relationship between people and time. Oral memory can be deeply old, but written memory gives a society a different kind of reach. It allows records to accumulate beyond the lifespan of any one person. It allows officials to compare harvests, rulers to claim descent, priests to preserve ritual sequences, astronomers to track cycles, and legal authorities to refer to decisions made before living memory. A written archive can make the past seem organized. It can also make the future seem manageable. Grain stored today can be promised tomorrow. Labor owed now can be demanded later. Boundaries can be defended because a record says they exist. The written sign becomes a small machine for extending obligation through time, but that same power can become a trap for modern interpretation. Because writing feels direct, it is easy to imagine that any ancient inscription once decoded would reveal the heart of a civilization. Sometimes it might. Often it would reveal something more ordinary and therefore more historically valuable: taxes, names, shipments, offerings, wages, titles, seals, inventories, local gods, repeated administrative habits. The mystery language no one can read may not contain a secret prophecy or lost philosophy. It may contain the working life of a community, the things people needed to track, because memory alone was no longer enough. That possibility does not make it less important. In many ways it makes it more human. The earliest written systems also show that people do not draw a hard line between the practical and the sacred. A record of grain may belong to a temple. A king's name may be a political claim and a ritual statement at the same time. A sign on a vessel may mark ownership, rank, protection, or offering. A symbol repeated on seals may belong to an official identity, a family, a deity, a commodity, or a place. Modern categories are often too neat for ancient life. When a script cannot be read, those overlapping meanings become even harder to separate. The same mark may sit at the crossing point of economy, belief, and authority, while scholars can only circle around it with partial evidence. This is why context matters so much. A sign found alone in a field offers very little. The same sign found in a storeroom beside standardized jars, weights, and ceilings begins to suggest administration. Found in a burial, it may suggest identity or status. Found in a sanctuary, it may suggest ritual. Found repeatedly across a wide region, it may suggest trade, shared authority, or cultural influence. Found in changing forms over centuries, it may suggest a living tradition. But context is fragile too. Excavations from earlier centuries sometimes removed objects without recording their exact locations. Looting separates inscriptions from the ground that could have explained them. Museum drawers hold many beautiful things whose archaeological stories were damaged before study began. In such cases, the silence around the text grows thicker, Still, the appearance of writing marks one of humanity's most consequential turns. It does not make a society wiser, kinder, or more advanced in any simple moral sense. It does not preserve everything, and it does not prevent collapse. Many literate civilizations fall. Many non-literate societies sustain complex knowledge across long periods. But writing creates a new relationship between people, material, and memory. It allows a community to place meaning into clay, stone, wood, metal, bone, bark, leather, or fibre, and hope that someone else somewhere else later will understand. Undeciphered scripts are the broken form of that hope. They show the ambition of preservation and the failure of continuity in the same object. So before the mystery can be approached as a puzzle of signs, it has to be understood as a story of transformation. A society begins to mark the world because memory alone no longer serves every need. Goods move farther, authority reaches wider, rituals become more formal, names matter across generations, land, labour, debt, rank and belief require durable witnesses. The written sign appears, and with it comes a promise that meaning can outlast the moment of speech. Yet the unreadable inscription proves that the promise is conditional. Meaning can survive only if the chain of readers survives with it. When that chain breaks, writing returns to the edge of image. It is still shaped by intelligence. It still carries the posture of a message. But it waits mute and patient for a reader who may never come. A mysterious script does not usually begin as a mystery. It begins as a habit that works. A mark is made because someone expects it to be recognized. A seal is pressed because another person will understand the authority behind it. A sign is repeated because community has already agreed openly or quietly that this shape carries a value beyond its appearance. Later ages may stare at the same marks with uncertainty, but at the moment of creation they belong to a living system. They are not puzzles to the people who use them. They are tool signs of office, tokens of memory, traces of exchange or gestures toward powers both human and divine. The birth of an unknown script often lies in a particular pressure inside a society. People do not invent writing because it is beautiful in the abstract. They invent or adopt durable signs because something has become too important, too complex, too distant, or too formal to leave entirely to memory. In a growing settlement, food must be stored and redistributed. In a palace, workers must be assigned and offerings counted. In a harbour, goods arrive from beyond the horizon and need to be marked before they vanish into warehouses, markets, or elite houses. In a temple ritual, objects may need signs of dedication, ownership, protection, or sacred identity. In a royal court, power may need to appear fixed, not merely spoken. The first signs may be modest, but behind them stands a society learning to make memory visible. Sometimes that society borrows the idea of writing from neighbours while reshaping it for its own needs. Sometimes it adapts existing symbols into a more regular system. Sometimes it creates marks that look independent enough to leave scholars uncertain about their origins. The evidence remains incomplete because the earlier stages of writing are often poorly preserved. Clay survives well when fired by accident or design. Stone survives when it is not reused. Metal survives unevenly. Wood, cloth, bark, leather, palm leaves, and other organic materials vanish in most climates. A script known from a few stone or clay objects may once have flourished on perishable surfaces that have left no trace at all. What appears sudden in the archaeological record may actually be the last visible stage of a much longer development. This is one reason undeciphered scripts are so difficult. Archaeologists may find the durable tip of an invisible tradition. The surviving signs might belong to a scribal world that mainly wrote on materials now gone. The few inscriptions that remain may not represent ordinary writing, but special cases where signs were placed on objects meant to endure. A carved stone may preserve a ceremonial use of a script, while the everyday accounts letters, labels or training exercises disappeared centuries ago in damp soil. Modern scholars then face a distorted archive. They must judge the whole system from fragments that were never meant to be the whole system. The conditions that create mysterious scripts are often found at crossroads. Not always literal crossroads of roads and rivers, though those matter, but social crossroads where different needs meet. A trading town may receive objects, weights, measures, and symbols from several directions. An island society may stand between larger powers and develop signs suited to its own administration. A mountain region may hold local traditions while absorbing influence from valleys and empires nearby. A palace centre may gather grain metal animals, textiles, and labour from surrounding villages, turning scattered production into centralised record keeping. A sanctuary may attract offerings from many communities, making signs useful for marking names, dedications, or ritual categories. In such places, writing can grow not as a single brilliant invention, but as a response to crowded relationships. Yet not every symbol system becomes writing in the full sense. This boundary is one of the most delicate problems in the study of ancient marks. A potter's mark may identify a workshop without recording language. A clan sign may represent a group but not speech. A tally may count goods without forming words. A decorative pattern may repeat for reasons of style, not grammar. A religious symbol may carry meaning but not encode a sentence. Scholars still debate where certain ancient systems belong along this spectrum. Some may be true scripts, some may be proto-writing, some may be emblem systems, and some may combine several functions at once. No single explanation fully accounts for all cases, because human beings have always found many ways to make marks meaningful. The mystery deepens when signs seem organized enough to suggest writing but too limited to confirm it. A short inscription may contain only 3 or 4 marks. A seal impression may repeat a sequence, but the sequence could be a name, a title, a commodity, a place, or a symbolic formula. A group of signs may show direction and order yet remain too brief to reveal grammar. A long text, by contrast, can show repeated endings, internal patterns, and possible word divisions. But many undeciphered systems survive mostly in short inscriptions. They tempt interpretation while withholding the evidence that would allow it to be tested. This is one of the quiet frustrations of the field. Some scripts may remain unread, not because they are impossibly strange, but because history preserved too little. In the ancient world, scribes do not appear out of nowhere. They are trained into a discipline. They learn hand movements, sign forms, materials, conventions, and the social meaning of accuracy. They may work in palace offices, temples, workshops, trading houses, or elite households. They may not be numerous. Their knowledge may be protected, formalized, inherited, or attached to status. In some societies, the written sign itself carries prestige because most people cannot produce it. A marked object may announce that it belongs to a world of administration, ritual, or power, beyond the reach of ordinary speech. That prestige can encourage scripts to become visually distinctive. Signs may not merely communicate, they may display authority. This display matters because writing is often seen before it is read. A seal pressed into clay can intimidate even someone who cannot interpret every detail. A carved inscription on a monument can proclaim order through its placement, scale, and repetition. A tablet full of signs can represent the presence of an institution. The visual discipline of writing can become part of its force. For modern viewers, this creates a strange echo of the ancient experience. Many people who lived under early literate institutions may not have read the signs either, yet they understood that the signs mattered. Today, scholars may stand in a similar position for different reasons. They know the marks are meaningful, but not yet how meaning works inside them. The birth of a script also depends on the language beneath it, and this is where many mysteries begin. A script can be adapted to record a language poorly, elegantly, partially, or in ways that only trained users understand. Some systems represent sounds, some represent syllables, some represent words or ideas. Many combine these methods. A sign may stand for a word in one context and a sound in another. A symbol may carry an old pictorial origin long after its users treat it as a conventional mark. If later scholars do not know the language being recorded, even identifying the script type becomes difficult. A repeated sign could be a sound, a word, a title marker, a number, or a grammatical ending. What survives in the record suggests structure, but structure is not the same as speech. There is a lesser-known danger in assuming that scripts are born complete. In reality, writing systems can pass through unstable phases. Signs may vary from scribe to scribe. Direction may not be fully standardized. The same object type may use abbreviations or formulas that outsiders cannot reconstruct. Local traditions may differ. A script may be used for a narrow purpose before expanding, or it may never expand at all. A society might use writing mainly for labels and names, never developing the long narrative texts that modern scholars hope for. If that society later disappears or changes its habits, the surviving system can look permanently incomplete. The mystery may not be a lost library, but a writing practice that never needed to become a library. Ancient scripts also develop inside environments that shape their form. Clay encourages pressing, drawing, or incising while the surface is soft. Stone encourages cutting, but with effort, often favouring durable public statements. Ink on pottery allows quicker strokes. Seals require signs that can be carved small and reversed for impression. Metal can carry prestige but is often reused. Bone and ivory hold fine detail but survive unevenly. The writing surface is not passive. It influences the shape, length, and purpose of the text. A script known from seals may look compact and emblematic because seals demand compression. A script known from painted pottery may appear fluid. A script known from stone may seem formal and monumental. Without the missing everyday materials, scholars may mistake one mode of use for the whole tradition. At times, the origin of a mysterious script may lie in contact with a powerful neighbour. A community sees the usefulness of written marks in trade diplomacy, tribute, or administration, and develops its own version. But influence does not mean simple copying. People may borrow the idea of recording language while inventing signs that fit local identity. They may adapt symbols from older art, religious imagery, property marks, counting systems, or imported scripts. This mixture can create a system that looks familiar in some ways and alien in others. It may resemble writing from nearby regions without matching it closely enough to read. Such half-familiar scripts are among the most frustrating because they seem to stand near a known doorway without allowing entrance. The creation of a script can also be political. To write in a local system can be a statement of independence, legitimacy, or sacred authority. A ruler may want signs that belong to his court, not to a rival empire. A priesthood may preserve a script because it anchors ritual continuity. A community may maintain distinctive marks because they separate insiders from outsiders. In such cases, writing is not only communication, it is identity made visible. When the society later fades, that identity becomes harder to reconstruct. The script remains as a badge without a readable name. By the time modern scholars encounter these signs, the birth of the script is already hidden behind its death. The living reasons for its creation must be inferred from distribution material sign order, archaeological context, and comparison with better-known systems. The process demands patience because a script is not a single object but a social practice. It requires people who make signs, people who understand them, institutions that value them, materials that carry them, and situations where they matter. Remove enough of those supports, and the script can vanish from living use even while its marks endure. So the unknown script begins to take shape in the imagination not as a code invented for secrecy, but as an ordinary system once held inside an extraordinary network of human need. It is born from counting, naming, promising, dedicating, ruling, trading, remembering, and displaying. It grows in clay dust storage rooms, harbour towns, sanctuaries, palaces, workshops, and burial places. It may be carried by scribes whose hands move with trained certainty across surfaces now broken and scattered. It may live for generations in a world that assumes its signs will remain understandable. Then circumstances change. The school closes, the palace burns, the trade route bends elsewhere, the temple loses its voice, the language shifts, the signs continue to exist, but the habit that made them alive begins to fade. By the time they reach the present, they have become what they never were at their birth, a mystery language no one can read. The message becomes unreadable, not at the moment it is written, but later when the last person who understands it no longer has a student, a child, a colleague, or a ritual successor to carry the knowledge forward. That is the true break. A tablet can crack and still remain partly legible. A stone can lose its edge and still preserve enough signs to be studied. A seal can survive with only a shallow impression and still reveal the order of its marks. But when the living chain of readers ends, the writing enters a different kind of ruin. It may look intact. It may be carefully stored in a museum case, photographed in high resolution, measured, drawn, catalogued, and protected from further decay. Yet its original function has failed. It can still be seen, but it can no longer be heard. This separation between survival and understanding is one of the central tragedies of ancient history. Many objects endure because they are made from stubborn materials. Fired clay can last for thousands of years. Stone can resist weather long enough to cross entire ages. Metal can preserve incised marks if corrosion is not too severe. Ivory, bone shell, and ceramic can carry signs through burial and rediscovery. But language is not made from these materials alone. Language depends on communities. It depends on people agreeing that a sign means something, that a sequence follows, rules that a name belongs to a person or place, that a number marks a quantity, that a formula has force, that a word carries memory. Objects survive in the ground. Meaning survives only through use. The fall from use can happen slowly. A script may first become restricted to official or sacred settings, while ordinary people use another language or another writing system in daily life. Then it may become ceremonial, copied by specialists whose understanding narrows over time. Later, still signs may be reproduced for tradition more than comprehension, like inherited patterns whose authority remains even as their grammar fades. Eventually the marks may be imitated, misunderstood, or abandoned altogether. In other cases the break is violent. A city burns, archives collapse, schools disappear, and a scribal class loses the institutions that supported it. Conquest may replace one administrative system with another. Deportation, migration, epidemic, disease, environmental stress, or economic decline can scatter the people who once maintained the script. Scholars still debate the balance of these causes in many ancient cases, because the evidence remains incomplete and each society carries its own pattern of loss. There is a temptation to imagine a single dramatic ending, the last scribe sitting in the ruins, the final tablet left unfinished, the old signs never written again. History may occasionally produce such moments, but more often the death of a script is quieter. People adapt. They use a neighbouring script because it is more useful in trade. They teach their children the language of a new administration because survival requires it. They keep old names but write them differently. They continue rituals but no longer understand the oldest formulae in the same way. They move merry trade, convert, obey, resist, and forget by degrees. A script can disappear through daily practicality as much as catastrophe. The result looks sudden only because the archaeological record is broken. Once the script is no longer read, the inscriptions begin a second life. They become marks without an audience, messages without a living destination. Some remain in the open, weathering slowly on cliff stones or monuments. Others are buried almost at once, sealed beneath floors, collapsed walls, flood deposits, ash layers, or later construction. Some travel far from their original context. A carved object may be reused in a new building by people who appreciate its material but not its meaning. A seal may be kept as an heirloom after its text is no longer understood. A decorated vessel may be traded beyond the region where its marks once made sense. Centuries later, an excavator may find it in a place that is not its birthplace, adding another layer of uncertainty. What survives in the record suggests movement, contact, and reuse, but it does not always reveal the path. This is why the location of an inscription matters so deeply. A text found exactly where it was used carries a trace of its old life. A tablet in a storage room, a mark on a jar near similar jars, a seal impression in an administrative building, a dedication in a sanctuary, or a burial object beside human remains can offer clues even before translation. But many inscriptions are not so fortunate. Some are found in disturbed layers moved by later digging, erosion, ancient rebuilding, or modern looting. Others appear on objects that entered collections long before careful excavation standards. Without context, the signs float. They may still be studied as patterns, but their social meaning becomes harder to restore. An unreadable inscription without context is like a voice recorded without knowing who spoke where or why. The ancient world is full of such displaced voices. A small object enters the earth in one age and leaves it in another, no longer surrounded by the people, buildings, and customs that once explained it. Its signs may be perfectly visible. The problem is not damage, but isolation. A short sequence of marks can rarely explain itself. If it repeats on many objects from known settings, scholars can begin to build possibilities. If it stands alone, certainty recedes. It may be a personal name, a title, a maker's mark, a clan emblem, a number, an offering, a warning, a blessing, or a label for goods long vanished. No single explanation fully accounts for a mark separated from its world. There is a lesser-known irony in this process. Some ancient inscriptions survive because nobody later found them useful. A clay tablet preserved in a collapsed archive may endure because fire hardened it and rubble protected it. A stone left in a ruined sanctuary may remain because later builders ignored it. A broken pot with a scratched mark may survive because it was discarded in a trash pit, then sealed under layers of habitation. The things that reach the present are not always the things ancient people valued most. They are the things that happen to pass through the hazards of time. Fragile documents of enormous importance may have vanished while a routine label survives by chance. Archaeology often depends on such accidents, and undeciphered writing makes the accidents feel sharper because every surviving sign may matter. When an inscription loses its readers, it also loses its sound. This is easy to overlook because writing appears visual, but behind many scripts is a spoken language, or at least a set of spoken names, terms, titles, and formulas. To read is not only to recognize shapes, it is to recover, however imperfectly, the sound system and meaning carried by those shapes. Without that sound, ancient people become strangely muted. Their houses may be visible, their bones may be studied, their food remains may be analysed, their trade goods may be traced. But their own terms for themselves, their places, their gods, their offices, their anxieties and their obligations remain uncertain. Later cultures may give them names, but those names may not be what they used. The separation of script from language can become especially severe when a population changes but material culture continues. A region may show continuity in pottery settlement, farming and burial habits, while its political language shifts. Or the reverse may happen. A ruling elite may introduce a script that does not represent the speech of most inhabitants. An inscription may record the language of administrators, traders, priests, or foreign rulers, rather than the daily language heard in fields and homes. Without decipherment, it is difficult to know whose voice is actually present. The signs may belong to a narrow class whose records survive better than the voices of everyone around them. This uncertainty matters because writing can easily be mistaken for the whole society, when it may represent only one layer of it. Even when a script is lost, memory of its importance may linger. Later people sometimes encounter old signs and treat them as sacred, magical, ancestral, or royal, without being able to read them. They may preserve stones, copy marks, build legends around them, or avoid disturbing them. A carved inscription can outlive literacy by becoming an object of awe. This afterlife can protect the text, but it can also distort its meaning. A practical administrative record may become a sacred relic. A royal boast may become a charm. A boundary marker may become a mysterious ancient monument. Over time, the unreadable sign gathers new meanings from people who inherit its presence, but not its language. Modern discovery adds yet another layer. When an archaeologist uncovers unreadable writing, the first act is often not interpretation but restraint. The object must be recorded as carefully as possible, because every scratch angle, break and find spot may later matter. A faint line could be a sign or damage. A repeated shape could be intentional, or the result of a tool slipping in a familiar way. A mark might have been made before firing, after firing, during use, after breakage, or even long after the object's original life. The difference matters. A sign scratched onto a vessel before it entered circulation belongs to a different world from one scratched onto a shard after it broke. The evidence remains incomplete until the object is placed within its full material story. This careful attention protects the study from wishful reading. Human eyes are skilled at finding patterns, sometimes too skilled. A cluster of marks may seem like a word because modern expectation wants it to be one. A repeated sign may seem grammatical when it is merely decorative. A short sequence may be forced into a known language because the result feels satisfying. Serious scholarship resists that urge. It accepts that some messages may remain unread for a long time, perhaps forever unless new evidence appears. The silence is not a failure of imagination. It is a limit set by the surviving record. Still, the silence is not lifeless. A message without a reader continues to act on the present because it changes the questions that can be asked. It forces scholars to study not only language but systems of preservation, loss, contact and memory. It asks how a society teaches its signs, how it stores authority, how it marks value, how it survives disruption, and how much of its inner life can be reconstructed from the outside. It reminds modern observers that history is shaped as much by broken transmission as by survival. Every unreadable inscription is evidence of a message that crossed time physically but not fully intellectually. In the end, messages without readers occupy a strange middle ground between absence and presence. They are not mute stones because they were once made to communicate. They are not living texts because their language no longer moves through a community of readers. They sit between those states, carrying the outline of speech but not its recoverable voice. The person who made the mark may have expected quick recognition from a clerk, a priest, a buyer, a ruler, a descendant, or a god. Instead, the mark travels far beyond its intended world. It reaches a future filled with cameras, laboratories, museums, databases, and scholars who can preserve it better than anyone in antiquity but still cannot read it. The message survives, the reader does not, and in that separation the mystery deepens. The problem of a lost language begins with the distinction that sounds simple until the evidence begins to resist it. A script is the system of visible signs. A language is the spoken or conceptual system those signs are meant to represent. The two are connected, but they are not the same. A language can be written in different scripts. A script can be used for more than one language. A symbol can represent a sound, a syllable, a word, an idea, a number, a title, a divine name, or a category that only trained users recognize. When modern scholars face an unreadable inscription, they must ask two questions at once. What are the signs doing, and what language, if any, lies beneath them? The difficulty is that each question depends partly on the other, so the search begins inside a circle. In better-known cases, that circle can be broken. If the language is familiar, an unknown script may be approached by looking for names, repeated endings, or sound patterns that match expectations. If the script is known, an unknown language may still be studied by reading the sounds and comparing them to related tongues. But the hardest mysteries arise when both sides are uncertain. The signs are unfamiliar, and the language behind them has no clear descendant or no securely identified relatives. The text then becomes a locked object with two missing keys. Even if scholars can count the signs, classify them, and observe their patterns, they cannot easily know whether those patterns belong to grammar, spelling, accounting, ritual order, or something else entirely. This is why some ancient writing systems remain suspended between recognition and translation. The signs may be catalogued in careful lists. Their direction may be guessed from spacing sign orientation or the way marks fit onto the object. Repeated sequences may be identified. Certain signs may appear at the beginning or end of inscriptions. Some may seem to function like numbers. Others may appear only in special contexts, perhaps marking people, places, gods, goods, or offices. These observations are not useless. They are the foundation of any serious attempt. But they are not enough to produce a readable language. A sign list is not a dictionary. A pattern is not a sentence. A repeated ending is not a translation. The difficulty grows because ancient writing systems do not always behave in ways modern readers expect. Alphabetic writing, where signs roughly represent individual sounds, is only one solution among many. Some systems use syllables, some use word signs, some combine sound values with meaning signs, some include determinative signs that help classify a word without necessarily being pronounced. Some omit vowels, some mark numbers separately, some write personal names differently from ordinary words, some preserve older spellings long after pronunciation changes, some use abbreviations so familiar to their original readers that they were never meant to be transparent to outsiders. The evidence remains incomplete whenever the surviving texts are short damaged or drawn from only one type of object. A lost language adds another layer of difficulty because it removes expectation. If scholars do not know what the language should sound like, they cannot easily test proposed readings. A sequence might be read as the name of a ruler, but without independent evidence for that ruler's name, the claim floats. A sign might be interpreted as a word for king, grain, god house, or land, but unless that reading helps explain many other inscriptions in a consistent way, it remains a guess. Real decipherment is not the solving of one attractive phrase. It is the building of a system that works repeatedly across different texts, contexts, and sign sequences. It must explain not only the exciting pieces but the ordinary ones too. This is where many false breakthroughs fail. A proposed decipherment may produce a dramatic reading for one inscription, but collapse when applied to the next. It may depend on choosing signs selectively, ignoring inconvenient variants, or forcing the text into a language that does not fit the archaeological setting. It may find patterns that are real, but misread their function. A sequence that appears on many seals might not be a word at all, but a title, a commodity code, a family mark, or a ritual formula. A short inscription can be made to say almost anything if the method is loose enough. Serious scholarship moves more slowly because it has to survive contact with the full evidence, not just the most tempting example. The difference between script and language also explains why some inscriptions can be partly understood without being truly read. A scholar may identify numbers, repeated administrative layouts, or probable names without knowing the full language. A tablet might clearly record quantities because the numerical system is recognizable, while the commodities being counted remain uncertain. A seal may show a repeated sign group in a position where names often appear, yet the sound and meaning of the name remain unknown. A funerary object may follow a familiar pattern of placement suggesting commemoration, but the words themselves stay closed. These partial insights matter. They turn silence into a softer kind of uncertainty, but they do not restore the lost voice. In some cases, the language behind a mysterious script may belong to a family still known today, but the connection is too distant or poorly documented to prove. Languages change relentlessly. Sounds shift. Words are replaced. Grammar transforms. Borrowing from neighbours complicates the picture. A language spoken thousands of years ago may leave descendants that preserve only fragments of its old structure, and those descendants may themselves be known from late or limited sources. If an undeciphered text records a language at an early stage, modern comparison may not be strong enough to identify it with confidence. Scholars still debate such relationships in several fields because resemblance can be meaningful, accidental, borrowed, or imagined. There is also the possibility that a script records more than one language. Ancient communities are often multilingual, especially in zones of trade migration, empire, and ritual exchange. A palace may use one language for administration and another for local speech. Merchants may know several languages and mark goods in whichever system best serves exchange. A sacred formula may preserve an older language long after everyday speech has changed. Names may come from one language, while titles come from another. If a small undeciphered corpus contains this kind of mixture, it becomes even harder to decode. A sign sequence may look irregular, not because the system is chaotic, but because the society using it is linguistically layered. The physical layout of a text can provide clues, but it can also mislead. Modern readers are used to spaces between words, standard lines, punctuation, and predictable direction. Many ancient scripts offer none of these comforts. Words may run together. Lines may curve around objects. Signs may follow the shape of a seal vessel plaque or stone. Some texts change direction from line to line. Some signs may be mirrored or rotated because of the writing surface or the method of impression. Damage can remove the very marks that would clarify order. A break at the edge of a tablet may erase an ending that would reveal grammar. A missing corner of a seal may remove the sign that identifies the whole sequence. What survives in the record suggests form, but form can be distorted by breakage and object design. Even the question of whether a set of marks records language at all can remain unsettled. A system may be highly meaningful without being full writing. It may encode ownership categories, quantities, ritual signs, or administrative identifiers rather than speech. Modern people often assume that repeated signs must be words, but ancient societies used many visual systems. Tallies, emblems, heraldic symbols, maker's marks, property marks, and sacred motifs can all carry information. Some may exist beside true writing and borrow its visual authority. Others may precede writing or remain independent from it. The boundary between symbolic communication and script is not always sharp. No single explanation fully accounts for every group of ancient signs that appears to be on the edge of language. This uncertainty is especially clear when the corpus is small. A living language reveals itself through variation. It needs many examples to show grammar, vocabulary, and patterns of use. With only a handful of short inscriptions, scholars may be able to count signs, but not understand how they behave. If a system has hundreds or thousands of texts, statistical patterns become stronger. If it has only 30 objects, many broken many without secure context, even the most careful analysis has limits. A repeated sign might be important, or it might only appear often because the surviving objects all come from the same kind of setting. Archaeological accident can look like linguistic pattern. The lost language also raises the issue of names. Names are often the first cracks in an undeciphered system, because they can sometimes be recognized from outside sources. Royal names, place names, divine names, or foreign names may appear in more than one language. When scholars can identify a known name inside an unknown script, they may begin assigning sound values to signs. But if no known names appear, or if the society is poorly documented by its neighbours, that route closes. Many ancient communities did not have the historical fortune of being described clearly by literate outsiders. Their own texts are the very things that would tell modern people who they were, and those texts cannot yet be read. The problem folds back on itself. A lesser-known difficulty lies in the possibility of limited literacy. If only certain formulas were written, the surviving language may be repetitive and narrow. A corpus of seal inscriptions may contain mostly names and titles, not enough grammar to reveal ordinary speech. A set of offerings may repeat sacred phrases without showing daily vocabulary. A group of commodity labels may contain numbers and goods, but no verbs, no stories, no complex sentences. It is possible to possess genuine writing and still leave behind a corpus too restricted for full decipherment. The language may not be lost because it was never rich. It is lost because the surviving written sample is too thin, and yet even limited text can matter enormously. A single title can reveal hierarchy. A place name can reshape maps of influence. A commodity term can show trade. A divine name can open a window onto belief. A grammatical ending can connect a language to a wider family. A personal name can restore individuality to a world otherwise known mostly through objects and ruins. This is why scholars keep returning to unreadable inscriptions with such patience. The reward is not only the possibility of dramatic revelation, it is the chance to recover small, precise pieces of human life that archaeology can sense but not name. The problem of lost languages therefore rests on a tension between visibility and absence. The signs are visible, sometimes beautifully so. They can be drawn, photographed, scanned, counted, and compared, but the language behind them is a living thing that has stopped living. It once moved through mouths, ears, hands, habits, institutions, and memories. It once named children, goods, places, ancestors, rulers, gods, dangers, seasons, debts, and hopes. Then the movement ceased. The marks stayed behind like footprints hardened in mud after the traveller has gone beyond the horizon. To approach such a language is to accept that not every silence can be broken by cleverness alone. It requires evidence, context, repetition, comparison, and luck. It requires humility before the possibility that the surviving fragments are too few, too narrow, or too isolated. But it also requires faith in small clues, because decipherments often begin with details that seem minor until they connect. A sign repeated at the edge of several inscriptions, a number beside a vessel type, a mark shared between distant sites, a name preserved by a neighbouring culture, a damaged object re-examined under better light. In the study of lost languages, certainty rarely arrives as a thunderclap. It gathers slowly, sign by sign, until a pattern begins to carry the weight of meaning. For now, many ancient marks remain suspended in that patient darkness. They are scripts without secure languages, languages without recoverable voices, visible systems without living readers. They remind the present that writing is not magic by itself. It does not guarantee survival of meaning. It only creates the possibility of survival, and possibility can fail. The lost language waits beneath the signs, not gone entirely, but unreachable through ordinary sight. It is there in the spacing, the repetition, the tool marks, the chosen surface, the archaeological setting, and the stubborn order of shapes. It is there like a sound sealed inside stone. The problem is not that the ancients said nothing. The problem is that they said something in a world whose listening has disappeared. The first clue is usually not a translation. It is repetition. A sign appears, then appears again somewhere else, not exactly by chance, and not always in the same company. A short sequence is found on several objects. A mark tends to stand near the beginning of inscriptions. Another seems to gather near the end. A certain cluster appears on seals from one region, but not another. A shape changes slightly depending on the hand that made it, yet remains recognizable enough to be counted as the same sign. Before any lost word can be heard, scholars begin with this quieter work, counting, grouping, comparing, and watching how the unknown behaves. This work can seem modest beside the romance of decipherment, but it is the foundation beneath every serious claim. A script that cannot yet be read can still reveal habits. It may show whether signs are arranged linearly or clustered. It may show whether the system has a small number of signs suggesting something close to an alphabet, or a larger number suggesting syllables, word signs, or a mixed system. It may show whether some signs occur very frequently while others are rare. It may reveal whether inscriptions have recurring openings, endings, or internal patterns. These observations do not solve the language, but they begin to define the shape of the lock. The process begins with the creation of a corpus, a gathered body of all known inscriptions. This is harder than it sounds. Objects may be scattered across museums, excavation reports, private collections, old drawings, broken archives, and storage rooms where they were catalogued decades earlier under different names. Some signs may be visible only in certain lighting. Others may have been misdrawn by earlier researchers. A scratch once recorded as writing may turn out to be damage. A faint mark dismissed as accidental may prove to be deliberate. Modern study often returns to original objects because every transcription is an interpretation. The evidence remains incomplete when the object is lost, poorly preserved, or known only from an old copy. Once the corpus is assembled, the signs must be identified. This is not simply a matter of giving each shape a number. Ancient hands vary. A sign carved carefully into stone may look different from the same sign scratched quickly onto pottery. A seal impression may reverse the direction of a mark. A damaged tablet may preserve only part of a shape. Scribes may use local variants, abbreviations, or decorative forms. Scholars must decide whether two similar marks are versions of one sign or separate signs entirely. If they merge too much, they erase distinctions that might carry meaning. If they separate too much, they create false complexity. The work demands patience because a sign list is not discovered all at once. It is refined through long contact with the material. Direction is another early question. Some scripts run left to right, others right to left, others top to bottom, and some change direction depending on layout or period. On certain ancient objects, the orientation of human or animal figures may suggest where reading begins. On others, the signs are arranged along the edge of a seal around the curve of a vessel, or in a compact block where modern habits offer little help. The beginning of a text matters because repeated initial signs may mark names, titles, invocations, commodities, or formulas. If the direction is reversed, every pattern changes. A supposed ending becomes an opening. A possible suffix becomes a prefix. A name may turn inside out. Spacing can help, but many ancient inscriptions do not offer clear word divisions. Signs may be packed tightly because the surface is small. A seal may compress a name and title into a tiny field. A tablet may divide entries by layout rather than by spaces. A painted line may curve around a vessel, making it difficult to know where one unit stops. In such cases, scholars look for repeated clusters. If three signs often appear together, perhaps they form a word or formula. If a sign appears after many different clusters, perhaps it marks a grammatical ending. If a group appears only beside numbers or vessel types, perhaps it names a commodity. These possibilities remain cautious. Pattern is evidence, but pattern is not yet meaning. Numbers are among the most valuable clues because they can sometimes be recognized without language. Repeated strokes, circles, notches, or grouped marks may form counting systems. If the inscription appears on storage jars, tablets, ceilings, weights, or administrative objects, numerical signs become especially important. A number beside a repeated sign may suggest a quantity of grain oil, animals, workers, or goods. If different numbers appear beside the same sign, that sign may represent something counted. If the same numerical system appears across many sites, it may reveal shared administrative practice. Yet even numbers can mislead. Some marks that look like numerals may be tally marks, decorative fillers, personal identifiers, or part of a sign system not based on quantity. No single explanation fully accounts for every repeated stroke. Names offer another path, but they are treacherous without outside confirmation. Ancient inscriptions often contain personal names, royal names, place names, divine names, and titles. These can repeat because people of rank want their identity fixed onto objects. A seal may carry the name of an official. A dedication may include the name of a deity. A boundary or monument may preserve the name of a ruler. If a sequence appears prominently and repeatedly, scholars may suspect a name. But suspicion is not proof. A repeated cluster could be a title such as ruler, priest, servant, house, city, temple, or offering. It could be a formula meaning belonging to, made by, or dedicated for. Without a bilingual text or external reference, the line between name and title can remain blurred. Sometimes geography helps. If a sign group appears mostly at one site, it may relate to that place a local authority, a local product, or a family active there. If another group appears across a trade route, it may belong to a commodity merchant network, standard, measure, or shared political system. Distribution maps can turn fragments into patterns. A mark found only in coastal contexts may suggest maritime exchange. A sign appearing in highland settlements may suggest regional identity. A seal type concentrated around administrative buildings may suggest bureaucracy. But distribution is shaped by excavation history as much as ancient reality. A region may seem silent simply because fewer sites have been excavated or because inscriptions were made on materials that did not survive. The material itself gives clues. A mark incised before firing on a clay vessel may have been part of production or distribution. A mark scratched after firing may have been added during use-ownership exchange or ritual deposition. A seal impression on wet clay suggests control over containers, doors, bundles, or documents. A stone inscription suggests display or durability, though not always public display. A metal object with signs may indicate prestige ownership offering or administrative value. Each material setting narrows possibilities without closing them. What survives in the record suggests function, but function may be layered. A vessel can be economic and ritual. A seal can be practical and symbolic. A monument can be political and sacred. The study of repetition also examines what does not happen. Certain signs may never appear together. Others may appear only at the beginning or only after numbers. Some may avoid final position. Some may cluster with specific object types. Absence can be meaningful, though it is dangerous when the corpus is small. If a sign never appears in a certain context, it may reveal grammar or category, or it may be a product of chance. Serious analysis must keep both possibilities alive. The evidence remains incomplete, and the smaller the corpus, the more easily chance disguises itself as rule. One lesser-known detail in the study of undeciphered writing is the importance of sign order variation. If the same two signs appear in different orders, scholars must consider whether order matters. In a true script, representing language order usually matters deeply. In an emblem, system order may be more flexible. In a seal design, artistic balance may influence arrangement. In a list, order may follow hierarchy rather than grammar. If sequences remain stable across many objects, this supports the idea of fixed reading. If they vary freely, the system may be less linguistic, more symbolic, or simply used in a way still misunderstood. The signs themselves do not announce which answer is correct. Computational methods have added new tools to this old work, but they have not removed the need for caution. Digital databases can compare sign frequencies, sequence probabilities, clustering and distribution across object types more quickly than earlier scholars could. Algorithms can test whether a corpus behaves more like known writing systems, numerical records, or non-linguistic symbol sets. Imaging can reveal faint marks, erase shadows, and distinguish tool cuts from damage. These methods can sharpen the evidence, but they cannot create missing context. A computer can find patterns. It cannot decide by itself whether a pattern is a word, a title, a number, or a ritual convention. Interpretation remains human, and human interpretation must remain accountable to the artifact. The work is also shaped by disagreement. Scholars may dispute whether a particular sign is one sign or two. They may disagree about reading direction corpus boundaries chronology, or whether the system qualifies as writing at all. These debates can seem frustrating, but they are part of the discipline's strength. In a field where the evidence is incomplete, certainty must be earned slowly. A proposed pattern must withstand other experts looking at the same marks from different angles. A decipherment must explain more than one object. A sign classification must make sense across the corpus. The unknown resists individual brilliance unless that brilliance can become shared method. There is a quiet intimacy in this kind of study. The modern scholar spends long hours with the gestures of ancient hands, learning their habits without knowing their words. A slight curve becomes familiar. A repeated ending begins to stand out. A careless incision reveals speed. A deep cut suggests emphasis, tool pressure, or a hard surface. A sign squeezed at the edge of an object shows that the maker misjudged space. These are not translations, but they are traces of human action. They bring the ancient writer close in one way while keeping meaning distant in another. The hand can be studied before the voice returns. Through repetition, the unreadable begins to acquire a kind of grammar of visibility. It becomes possible to say that certain signs are common. Certain sequences are stable, certain contexts matter, certain proposed readings are unlikely, and certain patterns deserve further testing. This is not the dramatic unlocking of a lost civilization, it is the preparation for such a possibility. Every future breakthrough depends on this groundwork. Without sign lists, distribution maps, material study, and pattern analysis, a bilingual inscription, if one appeared, would land in confusion. The key only works when the lock has been carefully described, and so scholars continue to search inside repetition, because repetition is where human systems reveal themselves. A random mark does not return with discipline. A meaningful system leaves habits. It repeats because people are trained, because institutions require consistency, because names recur, because goods move in standard categories, because rituals follow formulas, because power likes order. Somewhere in those repetitions may lie the first recoverable edge of meaning. Not a full sentence, perhaps, not even a word at first, but a structure strong enough to hold interpretation. The lost language remains silent, yet it is not shapeless. It has left behind rhythm, preference, position, and recurrence. In the dark archive of unreadable signs, repetition is the first faint light. The dream of a Rosetta key begins with the hope that somewhere on stone, clay, metal, or some overlooked fragment in a storeroom, the same message has been written twice. Once in a language already understood, and once in the language that remains silent. Such an object does not need to be large, though the imagination usually makes it monumental. It does not need to contain a grand proclamation, though dramatic history prefers kings' conquests and sacred decrees. It only needs to create a bridge, a name repeated across two systems, a title placed in a recognizable order, a dedication whose formula matches another, a list of goods written in two administrative habits. A bilingual text is powerful, not because it answers every question at once, but because it gives scholars a way to begin testing signs against meaning. The most famous examples of decipherment have made the bilingual key seem almost inevitable, as if every unreadable script is simply waiting for its matching translation to rise from the ground. The reality is far less generous. Many ancient writing systems survive without any known bilingual text. Others may have once had such bridges, but those bridges were written on perishable materials destroyed, in war reused as building stone broken into fragments, or still buried beyond modern reach. Some societies lived outside the reach of literate neighbours who might have recorded their words in parallel. Others used writing in ways too narrow to produce long public inscriptions. The evidence remains incomplete, and the absence of a key may be an accident of survival rather than proof that none ever existed. A true key works by fixing uncertainty. Before it appears, a repeated sign group might be a name, a title, a place, a god, or a commodity. After comparison with a known version, that group can begin to anchor sound or meaning. Once a few signs are anchored, they can be tested elsewhere. If the same sign values produce sensible results across other inscriptions, confidence grows. If they fail outside the first example, the proposed reading weakens. Decipherment is not a single leap from darkness into light. It is a chain of tests. The key opens the first door, but the corridors beyond still have to be mapped. Names are especially valuable because they travel more easily between languages than ordinary vocabulary. A ruler's name, a city name, or a divine name may be written in several scripts across diplomatic, commercial, or imperial settings. Even when pronunciation changes, the repeated identity can be recognized from context. A royal inscription may place the name in a prominent position. A coin may carry a ruler's image and a written title. A dedication may place a god's name in a formula known from neighboring cultures. These clues can begin the process of assigning values to signs, yet names alone can also mislead. Ancient names may be adapted, shortened, translated, or surrounded by titles that change from language to language. A name can start a decipherment, but it cannot finish one by itself. The dream of a Rosetta key also depends on contact between cultures. Bilingual and multilingual inscriptions appear where different administrative systems, languages, or populations meet. Empires issue commands to diverse subjects. Traders label goods across regions. Temples receive offerings from outsiders. Rulers present themselves to several audiences at once. Borderlands ports, courts, and conquered territories are especially promising because they force communication across linguistic boundaries. But many mystery scripts come from worlds where surviving evidence of such contact is limited or uneven. A society may have traded widely without leaving parallel texts. Goods can cross language barriers more easily than grammar. A jar can be recognized by shape, weight, smell, and value without anyone carving a careful translation onto it. Sometimes the closest thing to a key is not a bilingual inscription, but a shared object type. A sealed tablet, weight vessel, or tag may resemble objects from better-known systems. If a certain layout usually means ownership in one region, a similar layout elsewhere might suggest the same function. If numbers appear in columns beside repeated signs, the object may be administrative. If inscriptions appear near images of rulers or deities, they may contain names or titles. Such parallels can guide interpretation, but they cannot replace translation. Form is suggestive, not definitive. Ancient societies borrow object types without copying language exactly. They may adapt foreign administrative habits into local systems that remain opaque. What survives in the record suggests connection, but connection is not the same as equivalence. The search for a key often leads scholars back to old finds. Museum collections contain objects discovered before their importance was fully understood. Excavation notebooks may mention marked fragments that were never published in detail. A broken inscription may sit beside unrelated material until a later researcher notices that its signs match a known corpus. New imaging can reveal faint marks on objects long considered blank. A piece acquired as decoration may turn out to carry a crucial sequence. The breakthrough, if it comes, may not come from a spectacular new palace or untouched tomb, but from re-examining something already found, already labelled, and almost forgotten. History often hides its keys in plain sight, though no single explanation fully accounts for why some artifacts are recognised early and others wait for generations. There is also a possibility more frustrating than absence a partial key. A bilingual fragment may be too short, too damaged, or too formulaic to unlock the system fully. It may preserve only a title, a name, or a repeated dedication. It may confirm the direction of reading, but not the language. It may identify a handful of signs while leaving most of the script unresolved. Such fragments are precious and maddening. They prove that a connection exists, but they do not provide enough leverage to open the whole corpus. Scholars may spend decades building around a few secure points, trying to expand outward without overreaching. The silence becomes less complete, yet still stubborn. A partial key can also reveal that earlier assumptions were wrong. A sign thought to represent a sound may turn out to be a word sign. A supposed alphabet may behave more like a syllabary. A repeated ending may be part of a title rather than grammar. A direction of reading may be reversed. A corpus thought to represent one language may contain several. These corrections can feel like setbacks, but they are progress of a stricter kind. The unknown becomes better defined. False doors close. The structure of the problem changes. Serious decipherment advances not only by discovering what is true, but by eliminating what cannot be. The longing for a key has encouraged many unsupported claims. Some popular theories treat undeciphered scripts as if they must conceal lost wisdom, secret histories or messages from civilizations beyond the known archaeological record. Others claim sudden decipherment by matching signs to a favored modern language, often ignoring chronology, geography, grammar, and the full set of inscriptions. Such claims can be attractive because they give the silence a dramatic answer. But a real key does not simply produce a pleasing story. It produces a method that other scholars can test. It explains difficult inscriptions as well as convenient ones. It respects the archaeological setting. It accounts for sign variation, repeated patterns, and ordinary administrative debris. A decipherment that cannot survive beyond selected examples is not a decipherment. It is an interpretation built on fragile ground. The absence of a key does not mean scholars are helpless. Much can be learned without full translation. Patterns of distribution can show where the script was used. Materials can show whether signs belong to trade, ritual, burial, or administration. Comparison with settlement history can connect writing to growth, centralization, contact, or collapse. Sign frequency can suggest whether the system is likely alphabetic, syllabic, logographic, numerical, or mixed. Object types can hint at function. These are real forms of knowledge. They do not satisfy the desire to hear the words, but they keep the study anchored in evidence rather than fantasy. Still, the dream remains powerful because a bilingual text can change everything. It can turn mute objects into documents. It can reveal that a sequence repeated on seals is a title, that a mark beside a number is a measure, that a cluster once thought sacred is a place name, that a long inscription records a dedication rather than a law, that the people behind the signs spoke a language related to a family no one expected or unrelated to any known family at all. It can transform museum fragments from beautiful puzzles into witnesses. It can also humble expectations because the first readable texts may turn out to be ordinary records rather than grand revelations. That ordinariness would still matter. Ordinary records are where the texture of ancient life often survives most clearly. The search for a Rosetta key is also a search for historical overlap. It asks where two worlds touch strongly enough to write the same thing in different ways. It asks whether a society wanted outsiders to understand, whether rulers needed to communicate across languages, whether merchants moved through multilingual networks, whether temples welcomed foreign donors, whether conquest produced public declarations, or whether scribes were trained in more than one tradition. A bilingual inscription is not merely a tool for modern scholars. It is evidence that ancient people themselves lived across boundaries of speech. It shows that translation, adaptation, and layered identity were part of their world before they became part of ours. In many cases, the missing key may lie beyond the script itself, in a better understanding of the civilization around it. A newly excavated administrative building might explain object functions. A secure chronology might show which neighboring languages were present at the right time. A cemetery might reveal migration patterns through isotopes and DNA, though such evidence must be interpreted carefully and never equated too simply with language. Trade goods might identify routes where bilingual contact was likely. Environmental reconstruction might explain why a scribal center rose or fell. Each kind of evidence narrows the search. The key may not be one dramatic object, but a growing network of context that makes a future reading possible. The longing for a key carries a quiet emotional charge because it imagines a lost voice returning by comparison. One language reaches across to another. One script explains the next. A known word stands beside an unknown sign, and the distance between present and past becomes smaller. Yet the same dream also reveals how dependent history is on chance. A decree carved in 3 languages survives, because a stone was reused and later found. Another, perhaps equally important, is lost, because it was broken, burned, melted, or written on wood in a wet climate. Civilizations are not remembered in proportion to their richness. They are remembered through the accidents of preservation and the uneven survival of keys. For the mystery language no one can read, the dream remains both method and metaphor. Scholars search for repeated names, bilingual fragments, parallel formulas, foreign references, administrative overlaps, and any object that places the unknown beside the known. They do not need magic. They need context, patience, and a piece of evidence strong enough to hold. Until that piece appears, the signs remain visible but inwardly closed. They are like doors carved into stone without handles, waiting for the one artifact that shows where pressure must be applied. And somewhere, perhaps already excavated, perhaps still buried, perhaps long destroyed, there may have been such a key. It may not have looked important when first made. It may have been a practical notice, a merchant's label, a temple dedication, a royal title, or a small administrative text meant for people who moved easily between languages. Its makers may never have imagined that thousands of years later, their ordinary need to be understood by two audiences could become the hinge on which an entire lost world turns. Until such a bridge appears, the dream remains suspended over every unreadable sign, the hope that the ancient message was not written only once, and that somewhere in the broken archive of time it still has a twin. Behind every unreadable script stands a society that is not entirely unreadable. The signs may remain closed, but the people who made them still leave other traces in the ground. Their settlements hold patterns of movement and work. Their pottery carries habits of storage, cooking, serving, and exchange. Their fields leave pollen seeds, irrigation marks, terraces, and soil changes. Their dead are placed in ways that reveal care, hierarchy, fear, tenderness, and belief. Their tools show labour repeated over generations. Their houses show how families gather, divide space, keep animals, prepare food, and shelter from weather. Even when the text cannot be read, archaeology surrounds the silence with evidence, and the shape of a civilization begins to appear around the locked centre. This surrounding evidence matters because writing is never isolated from life. A script belongs to bodies, buildings, materials, roots, and institutions. If signs appear mainly in administrative buildings, they suggest systems of control. If they cluster in sanctuaries, they suggest ritual use. If they travel on seals and portable goods, they suggest exchange identity or authority moving across distance. If they appear in graves, they may belong to memory status, ancestry, or offerings. If they appear in workshops, they may mark production and ownership. The words remain unknown, but the placements begin to speak. What survives in the record suggests that the script had a role inside a wider order, and that order can be studied even without translation. In this way, an undeciphered language forces archaeology to become especially attentive. It cannot rely on written explanations from the people themselves. It must read the landscape instead. A city's street plan may show whether movement was controlled or organic. Storage facilities may reveal surplus. Fortifications may reveal fear, rivalry, or political ambition. Imported materials may reveal contact with distant regions. Standardized weights may suggest trade regulation. Specialized workshops may show craft organization. Irrigation channels may reveal the management of water. Burn layers may suggest destruction, accident, conflict, or ritual clearing, though no single explanation fully accounts for such evidence without careful context. The silent script becomes one clue among many, not the only path to knowledge. The societies behind unreadable writing are often more complex than the mystery label allows. They are not merely strange people who made strange signs. They are communities with practical problems and historical pressures. They face harvest cycles, population growth, disease, competition, drought, floods, shifting trade routes, family obligations, religious change, and political ambition. They store food, measure goods, bury relatives, repair roofs, teach children, build roads, cross rivers, fear outsiders, welcome merchants, and argue over land. The unreadable signs are embedded in that ordinary density. A tablet may look mysterious in a museum, but when it was made, it may have belonged to a world of dust, sweat, animal noise, grain, chaff, smoke, and officials waiting for accounts. That ordinary setting is important because it prevents the mystery from drifting into fantasy. When a script cannot be read, imagination often rushes toward the extravagant. It pictures lost wisdom, hidden codes, vanished empires far grander than the evidence supports. But archaeology usually offers a more grounded kind of wonder. It shows people solving local problems with available materials. It shows societies building systems that work for a time, then changing or failing under pressure. It shows richness without needing impossibility. The evidence remains incomplete, but incompleteness is not an invitation to detach the script from its world. The signs become more interesting, not less, when they are placed back into the human conditions that created them. A useful way to approach these silent civilizations is to ask what kind of society needs durable marks. A small village can remember many things through kinship reputation and repeated face-to-face contact. A larger settlement, especially one connected to trade or centralized storage, begins to strain those older systems. Goods arrive from people not personally known. Debts extend beyond immediate memory. Labor must be organized across seasons. Ritual obligations become formal. Rulers, councils, temples, or elite families may need to assert claims over people and resources. Writing, or something close to writing, appears where relationships become too layered to remain purely oral. This does not mean every complex society writes, or that writing proves civilization in any simple hierarchy. It means that writing often emerges where memory, authority, and distance begin to press against one another. The material distribution of undeciphered signs can reveal the scale of that pressure. If the same sign system appears across many settlements, it may point to a shared administration, religious network, trade system, or cultural identity. If it appears only at one major center, it may belong to a local elite or institution. If signs change from region to region, they may reflect local traditions within a broader sphere. If they appear suddenly and vanish quickly, they may belong to a period of intense experiment, contact, or political change. Chronology becomes essential. A script used for centuries tells a different story from one used for only a few generations. A system that spreads during urban growth and disappears during collapse may be tied to institutions that rose and fell with the city. The silence of unreadable texts can also make material culture more democratic in a strange way. When royal inscriptions can be read, rulers often dominate the historical story because they speak loudly from monuments. When texts are silent, the smaller traces of life gain weight. Hearths, storage pits loom, weights, grinding stones, animal bones, floor surfaces, child burials, discarded tools, and repaired vessels become central witnesses. The civilization cannot be reduced to the declarations of kings, because those declarations, if they exist, cannot yet be understood. The result is frustrating, but also valuable. It forces attention toward the many people who usually remain hidden beneath official writing. At the same time, unreadable scripts may conceal power. A seal impression might carry the name of an official whose authority shaped many lives. A tablet might record labor obligations, taxes, rations, or property transfers. A carved sign might mark sacred ownership, political allegiance, or exclusion. Without translation, the mechanisms of control remain partly invisible. Archaeology can show storage rooms and standardized containers, but not always the command structure behind them. It can show planned buildings, but not the titles of the people who ordered them. It can show graves with richer goods, but not the words used to define rank. The unread language protects both the intimate and the oppressive aspects of the past. Trade is often one of the clearest ways to connect silent scripts to living societies. Objects move, and their movement leaves trails. A seal from one region appears in another. A vessel shape spreads across ports. Metals, stones, shells, pigments, and luxury goods travel far from their sources. Isotopic analysis may identify where materials came from. Shipwrecks harbour deposits, caravan routes, and market towns can reveal networks of exchange. If unreadable signs appear on goods within these networks, they may mark ownership, origin, quantity, quality, destination, or ritual value. But trade does not guarantee shared language. People can exchange objects across immense linguistic gaps with gestures, interpreters, standard weights, repeated practice, and trust built over time. The signs may have served insiders within a network, not every person who touched the goods. Ritual life leaves a different kind of context. An unreadable inscription in a sanctuary is not automatically a prayer, but its setting changes the possibilities. Repeated signs on offerings may record donors' deities, blessings, vows, or categories of sacred goods. Marks on figurines, vessels, stones, or plaques may belong to acts of dedication. In burial context, signs may connect the dead to names, lineage, protection, memory, or status. Yet ritual objects can also be administrative. Temples often store wealth, manage land, employ workers, and participate in trade. The sacred and practical are not easily separated. What looks like devotion may also be accounting. What looks like accounting may also be devotion. Ancient institutions rarely respect modern boundaries. Environmental evidence adds another layer to the story. A script may rise during a period of agricultural abundance when surplus supports specialists, administrators, and craft workers. It may spread along river valleys where transport and irrigation encourage coordination. It may appear in coastal societies shaped by maritime exchange. It may decline during drought, soil exhaustion, flooding, shifting river courses, or political disruption connected to environmental stress. Scholars still debate many of these relationships because climate pressure does not act alone. Drought does not automatically destroy a society. Flooding does not automatically erase literacy. Human choices, social inequality, warfare, trade, resilience, and institutional flexibility all matter. Still, environmental reconstruction can show why a society might have needed writing, and why the institutions that carried it became fragile. One lesser-known detail is that unreadable scripts often survive best in the very places where crisis interrupts normal life. A burned building may harden clay tablets. A sudden abandonment may leave ceilings and storage jars in place. A collapse may preserve floors under rubble. A flood may seal a settlement beneath silt. A volcanic event, though rare, can freeze a moment with brutal clarity. Disaster can become preservation. This creates a distorted picture because the moments best preserved may be moments of interruption, not normal continuity. A script might seem tied to crisis only because crisis saved the evidence. The civilization behind the signs must therefore be reconstructed with care, not only from spectacular destruction layers but from long, ordinary sequences of occupation. The people who use the script may not have thought of themselves as belonging to a civilization with a single name. That is often a modern label. They may have identified by city, kin, group, ruler, valley, island, profession, deity, language, or ancestry. Archaeologists may name them after a site, a pottery style, a region, or a later tradition, because the people's own name remains unreadable. This is one of the subtler losses created by undeciphered writing. A society can leave signs and still lose its self-description. It can be studied, mapped, dated, and displayed while its own chosen words for itself remain hidden within the very inscriptions that should preserve them. Even so, the civilization is not voiceless in every sense. A house plan is a voice of habit. A repaired pot is a voice of thrift. A grave is a voice of mourning and belief. A road is a voice of movement. A storage jar is a voice of planning. A workshop floor is a voice of skill. A seal is a voice of authority even if its name is unreadable. The silent script sits among these other voices. It does not erase them. It sharpens the awareness that history is made from many kinds of evidence, some verbal and some material, some deliberate and some accidental, some elite and some ordinary. By tracing the civilization behind the silence, the mystery becomes wider and more human. The unknown signs are not floating symbols from nowhere. They belong to hands that grind grain shape, clay lift stones, guide animals, carry water, polish, metal, weave fibers, count offerings, close doors, open storerooms and stand beneath changing skies. They belong to institutions that rise because people trust fear, obey, negotiate, and remember. They belong to landscapes that feed and threaten communities in equal measure. The script remains unread, but the world around it becomes increasingly visible, and that visibility makes the silence more powerful, because the closer the civilization comes into view, the more clearly its unread words seem to wait at the center, holding back the names, thoughts, and meanings that would make the picture complete. The unreadable sign often stands closest to the most practical parts of ancient life. It may sit on the shoulder of a jar near the seal of a storeroom, along the edge of a tablet on a small tag once tied to a bundle, or on an object placed before a deity with careful hands. From a distance, such marks may seem to belong to the realm of mystery alone, but their settings often point toward work exchange, obligation, and ritual. Ancient writing rarely begins as literature in the modern sense. It usually enters the world through need. Someone has to count, someone has to identify, someone has to claim, someone has to dedicate, someone has to remember that a thing belongs to a person, a temple, a household, a ruler, a workshop, a ship, a field, or a god. Trade is one of the strongest forces behind such marking. Goods do not move through the ancient world as anonymous things. They carry origin, value, risk, and expectation. A jar of oil, a measure of grain, a bundle of cloth, a piece of metal, a bead of rare stone, or a container of perfume may pass through many hands before reaching its final place. Each transfer creates uncertainty. Who sent it? Who owns it? What quantity it contains? Whether it has been inspected? Whether it has been sealed? Whether it belongs to a tax, a gift, an offering, a payment, or a private exchange. In face-to-face village, life, memory, and reputation may carry much of this burden. In wider networks, marks become useful, because trust must travel farther than the people who first made the agreement. A seal impression is one of the most revealing objects in this world of controlled movement. A seal is small, but its authority can be large. When pressed into wet clay on a jar stopper, a door fastening a bundle or a document, it creates a sign that someone has approved, closed, owned, or witnessed something. The person receiving the sealed object may not need to read every sign in a modern sense. The image, emblem, or written sequence may be recognizable enough to carry authority. If the seal is broken, the break itself becomes evidence. A tiny lump of clay can therefore preserve an entire system of trust, the person who seals the institution behind the person, the goods being protected, and the expectation that others will respect the mark. When the script on such a seal cannot be read, its function may still be partly visible. Repeated impressions from the same seal can show administrative habits. Ceilings found near storage areas can suggest controlled access. Different seals in one building can indicate multiple officials or offices. A seal found far from its place of origin can suggest travel trade diplomacy or reuse. A sequence of signs on a seal might be a personal name, a title, an office, a deity, or a phrase asserting ownership. The evidence remains incomplete without translation, but the pattern of use can show that the signs were not idle decoration. They participated in the movement of goods and authority. Jars and containers create another field of clues. A mark made before firing may belong to production, perhaps identifying a potter workshop batch capacity or destination. A mark added after firing may belong to ownership, contents, reused trade, or ritual deposition. Some vessels carry single signs, others short sequences, and others marks that resemble numerals or accounting notations. A sign on a container might tell ancient users what was inside, where it came from, how much it held, who controlled it, or whether it had been offered in a sacred setting. Modern scholars must hold all of these possibilities carefully, because similar-looking marks may serve different purposes in different contexts. No single explanation fully accounts for every marked object. Administration thrives on such repetition. It is less glamorous than royal monuments, but it is often where writing becomes most essential. A centralized institution needs to know what enters and leaves. Grain animals, metals, textiles, oil, wine tools, land labor, and rations can all become part of a recorded system. Ancient administration may seem distant, but it rests on familiar pressures: scarcity, surplus, accountability, hierarchy, and the desire to prevent loss. A storehouse without records depends on memory and trust. A storehouse with marks, seals, and tablets creates a material trail. It makes goods part of a system that can be checked, compared, and commanded. The existence of such records does not automatically mean a society is rigid or bureaucratic in the same way as later empires. Early writing can be narrow, local, and attached to specific institutions. It may record only certain goods, certain transactions, or certain ceremonial obligations. It may be used intensely in one center and lightly elsewhere. It may appear during particular seasons such as harvest collection or ritual festivals. It may belong to a palace, temple, chiefdom, merchant network, or lineage authority, rather than a state in the fully developed sense. Scholars still debate the social scale behind many undeciphered corpora, because signs alone cannot reveal the full political structure. Yet their presence shows that certain relationships had become formal enough to need durable marks. Ritual use brings the mystery into a different register, though never entirely separate from economy. An object marked with unreadable signs and placed in a sanctuary may preserve a dedication, an offering record, a divine name, a donor's identity, or a formula meant to make the gift valid. It might also record the quantity or type of goods delivered to the temple. Ancient sacred spaces are often economic spaces as well. They gather land, labor, food, animals, metal, cloth, and prestige. A temple can be a place of prayer, storage, redistribution, craft production, and political display at once. A sign on a sacred vessel may therefore belong to devotion and management together. The modern division between spiritual and administrative life often fails to fit the ancient evidence. Burial contexts add another kind of possibility. Marks found in graves may identify the dead name, a lineage, mark ownership of grave goods, invoke protection, dedicate objects, or display rank. They may also be heirloom signs whose original meaning had already shifted by the time of burial. A seal placed beside a body may represent office, identity, or memory. A vessel with signs may have held offerings for the dead goods for a ceremony, or simply objects valued by mourners. Without translation, the signs cannot tell us exactly how the living understood the dead. but their placement shows that written or symbolic marking could accompany the most charged moments of human life. The same system that tracks goods in a storeroom may also touch grief status and the hope that identity persists beyond death. There is a lesser-known complication in the overlap between administration and ritual. Many societies treat offerings as obligations with record schedules, quantities, and proper forms. A gift to a deity may need to be counted. A festival may require stored goods. A temple workshop may produce objects for ritual distribution. Priests may control land and labor. In such a world, a tablet recording goods is not merely economic, and a sacred inscription is not merely spiritual. The signs may operate inside a system where divine authority and material management reinforce each other. When the language cannot be read, modern interpretation must avoid flattening this complexity. A mark may be devotional, bureaucratic, political and economic at the same time. Elite display is another possible function of unreadable writing. A ruler, official, priest, or wealthy household may use signs not only to communicate specific information, but to show membership in a powerful world. Writing can impress even those who cannot read it. Its ordered marks suggest access to training institutions and authority. A carved inscription on a prestigious object may signal that the owner belongs to a literate or semi-literate elite. A seal may function as a badge of office. A marked luxury good may carry social weight because it connects the object to distant trade-controlled production, sacred use, or recognized authority. In this sense, the visual presence of writing may matter alongside its linguistic meaning. This helps explain why some ancient sign systems appear in contexts of prestige rather than everyday documentation. If writing is rare, it can be valuable as display. A small number of signs on a weapon ornament vessel or stone plaque may elevate the object even if the text is brief. It may name the owner, mark a dedication, identify a workshop, or simply show connection to a literate tradition. The evidence remains incomplete, but the visual discipline of the signs can reveal that writing has symbolic power beyond the words themselves. To modern eyes, the unreadable inscription is mysterious. To many ancient eyes, it may also have been impressive, official, sacred, or socially charged. Commercial marks may be more modest, but they are equally important. A maker's mark can connect an object to a workshop. A capacity mark can standardize containers. A trader's sign can identify ownership. A short sequence can label contents. These practical uses are easy to underestimate because they lack drama, yet they reveal the everyday systems that make complex society function. The ancient world depends on countless acts of sorting, storing, moving, recording, and verifying. An unreadable mark on a jar may be closer to the daily life of a community than a monumental inscription ever could be. It may preserve the hand of someone who needed a shipment to arrive correctly, a workshop to be recognized, or a container not to be confused with another. The challenge is that one mark may change function over time. A vessel marked for production may later be reused in a household, then placed in a burial. A seal created for an official may later become an heirloom ornament. A sacred object may be looted, traded, or repurposed. A stone with writing may be built into a later wall by people who no longer understand it. The final archaeological context is not always the original use context. This creates interpretive traps. A marked jar in a tomb may not have been made for burial. A seal in a sanctuary may have had an administrative life before becoming an offering. A script associated with ritual deposits may have been used more widely on lost materials. What survives in the record suggests pathways, but those pathways can twist. The function of signs also depends on who could read them. If literacy is restricted, then a text may communicate differently to different audiences. To a trained scribe, it may carry specific words. To an official, it may confirm authority. To a worker, it may signal that the goods are controlled. To a worshipper, it may mark sacred legitimacy. To an outsider, it may simply look powerful or foreign. Writing operates through layers of recognition. Full reading is only one layer. This matters for undeciphered scripts because modern inability to read may resemble in a distant way the partial literacy of many ancient observers. The marks can have social force even when not everyone knows their exact content. When scholars examine these functions, they often move between caution and imagination. The caution is necessary because an unreadable sign cannot be forced into a role simply because the role seems plausible. The imagination is necessary because objects were used by living people in settings that rarely preserve every detail. The best interpretations remain grounded in repeated contexts, material traces, comparisons, and distribution. A single marked object may suggest. 100 marked objects from related settings can begin to argue. A pattern across settlements, storerooms, sanctuaries, and graves can reveal the social reach of the script even before translation. What emerges is a picture of writing as action. These signs do not merely sit on surfaces, they seal doors, move goods, honor gods, mark bodies, define property, display rank, organize labor, and carry memory into places where speech cannot remain. They belong to a world where trust must be materialized, where obligation must be fixed, where identity must be recognized beyond the immediate presence of the person. The mystery language no one can read may have spoken most often in such practical and ritual acts. Its lost words may have named oil, grain, bronze, sheep, offerings, ancestors, officials, cities, measures, gods, and debts. They may have recorded the ordinary machinery of civilization, the quiet systems that hold a society together until they no longer do, and this is what makes the silence so heavy. It is not only poetry, myth, or royal ambition that may be hidden from view, it is the structure of daily dependence. Who owes what? Who serves whom? Who gives to which deity? Who controls the storehouse? Who owns the seal? Who is remembered in death? Who has the right to mark an object and expect others to obey the mark? Without reading the signs, the answers remain just beyond reach. Yet the objects themselves show that such answers once mattered. The marks were made because ancient life required them. They were placed at the points where goods, belief, authority, and memory met. The script survives there not as an abstract puzzle, but as the shadow of a society organizing itself one sign at a time. False breakthroughs gather around unreadable scripts because silence creates space, and the human mind does not like empty space. A broken inscription, a repeating symbol, a row of unknown signs on a seal or tablet can invite disciplined study, but it can also invite impatience. Where evidence is incomplete, desire often tries to finish the sentence. A scholar may begin with a careful observation and then move one step too far. An enthusiast may see a resemblance between one ancient sign and a letter from a familiar alphabet, then build an entire reading on that resemblance. A popular writer may turn uncertainty into drama because mystery sells more easily than restraint. The result is a long history of proposed decipherments that seem for a moment to pull a lost language back into speech, only to collapse when the method is tested against the wider record. The appeal is understandable. To be the person who reads the unreadable is to stand at one of the most dramatic thresholds in historical study. A successful decipherment does not merely solve a technical problem. It can restore names, offices, offerings, laws, myths, places rulers and ordinary transactions. It can turn a civilization from an archaeological culture into a speaking historical presence. The temptation to claim such a breakthrough is enormous. Yet the standard must be severe, because the cost of error is also enormous. A false reading can mislead research for years. It can attach invented meanings to real people. It can reshape public imagination around a claim that never deserved confidence. In the study of lost scripts, a beautiful answer is not enough. It has to work. Most fragile claims begin with resemblance. A sign looks like a known letter, so it is given the sound of that letter. A sequence resembles a word in a modern or ancient language, so the entire inscription is read through that language. A symbol looks like a picture of a fish, a mountain, a hand, a bird, or a star, so it is assumed to mean that thing. Sometimes this instinct is not entirely foolish. Many writing systems do have pictorial origins. Some signs do preserve visual echoes of what they once represented. But by the time a script is mature, signs may have shifted far from literal pictures. A shape that began as an ox head may become a sound sign. A sign that looks like a plant may function as a syllable. A symbol that appears pictorial may be conventional, abstract, or borrowed. Visual resemblance alone is one of the weakest foundations for decipherment. Another common weakness is selective reading. A proposed system may explain a few inscriptions nicely, especially the ones chosen to introduce the theory, but fail when applied to the full corpus. Uncomfortable signs are treated as variants. Missing values are supplied freely. Words are adjusted to fit the desired language. Irregularities are excused as scribal errors whenever they become inconvenient. This is the opposite of a real decipherment. A real decipherment becomes stronger as it meets more evidence. It explains repeated signs, consistently handles damaged texts, cautiously predicts readings in new inscriptions, and accepts ordinary results as well as dramatic ones. It does not require the evidence to be trimmed into shape. The problem grows sharper when proposed readings depend on a favoured language that does not fit the time, place, or cultural context. Many undeciphered scripts are being claimed for languages far removed from their archaeological setting, sometimes by thousands of years or great distances. Such claims may rely on scattered sound similarities, but languages can produce accidental resemblances easily. A short sequence of signs can be made to resemble many words in many languages if enough freedom is allowed. Serious comparison requires regular sound correspondences, historical plausibility, grammar, and broad explanatory power. Without these, resemblance becomes a mirror. The interpreter sees what he or she brought to the inscription. Fringe theories often take this even further by treating unreadable scripts as evidence for lost continents, secret global civilizations, ancient visitors from impossible places, or hidden knowledge deliberately suppressed by experts. These stories can be entertaining, but they usually detach the signs from their archaeological world. They ignore the pottery settlement layers, carbon dates, tool marks, burial customs, trade goods, and local development that place the inscriptions inside a human context. The evidence remains incomplete, but incompleteness is not the same as permission. A gap in knowledge does not become proof of an unsupported story simply because the true answer is unknown. The ancient people who made the marks deserve better than being turned into props for modern fantasies. There are also false breakthroughs that arise not from fantasy, but from overconfidence in a single method. Statistics can show that a sign system has repeated patterns, but statistics alone cannot translate meaning. Linguistic comparison can suggest possibilities, but it cannot overcome a tiny corpus. Iconography can illuminate context, but images do not automatically explain adjacent signs. Archaeological setting can suggest function, but not necessarily grammar or vocabulary. Each method is powerful within limits. Problems begin when one kind of evidence is asked to do the work of all the others. No single explanation fully accounts for a mysterious script unless it can survive across material linguistic, statistical, and contextual lines. A fragile claim may also misunderstand the type of system being studied. If a set of marks is not full writing, trying to read it as sentences will produce illusion. If it is a mixed system using word signs, sound signs, and numbers, treating it as an alphabet will fail. If it is a set of names and titles, only forcing it into long narrative translation will distort it. If it is administrative shorthand, its missing elements may have been supplied by context known to ancient users, but lost to modern ones. Decipherment begins not with deciding what one wants the signs to say, but with asking what kind of system they could plausibly be. That answer may be less dramatic than a secret chronicle, but it is more likely to be true. The history of successful decipherment shows how strict the test must be. A real reading begins with anchors, a known name, a bilingual text, a repeated formula, a numerical system or a set of signs whose values can be checked across many examples. It builds gradually. It explains why signs appear where they do. It accounts for variance. It produces grammar that behaves like language, not like a list of convenient guesses. It allows other researchers to follow the method and arrive at the same or similar results. It can be wrong in details while still right in structure because future corrections refine rather than destroy it. False decipherments, by contrast, often depend on the interpreter. Remove the interpreter's private assumptions and the reading falls apart. This is why scholarly caution can look unsatisfying from the outside. The public often wants a declaration. Is it solved or not? Does it say this or not? Can it be read or not? The honest answer may be slower. A sign group may probably be a name. A symbol may possibly mark a number. A sequence may likely belong to a repeated formula. A proposed connection may be interesting but unproven. Scholars still debate many such points because the evidence is not strong enough to close the question. This caution is not timidity. It is the discipline required when dealing with the dead who cannot correct modern mistakes. There is a lesser-known kind of damage caused by false certainty. Once a dramatic claim enters popular culture, it can become difficult to remove. A speculative reading may be repeated in documentaries, websites, museum labels, social media posts, and casual histories until it feels familiar enough to seem established. Later correction sounds less exciting and therefore receives less attention. The public memory of the script becomes layered with claims that specialists have already rejected or never accepted. The mystery becomes clouded, not clarified. In this way, false decipherments can become a second burial covering the original evidence under modern invention. Yet not every failed attempt is useless. Some rejected decipherments sharpen the field by forcing better sign catalogues, clearer photographs, stricter criteria, and more explicit arguments. A wrong proposal can reveal where the evidence is weak. It can show which assumptions need testing. It can encourage scholars to define what would count as proof. The history of decipherment is not a neat procession of victories. It is a landscape of trial, error, revision, disagreement, and occasional breakthrough. The difference between productive failure and misleading fantasy lies in accountability. A hypothesis that can be tested and abandoned when it fails belongs to scholarship. A claim that explains away every objection belongs somewhere else. The careful study of undeciphered scripts therefore lives with tension. Too much caution can make progress painfully slow. Too much confidence can create illusions. Scholars have to imagine possible readings without falling in love with them too early. They have to notice resemblance without mistaking resemblance for proof. They have to welcome new methods without surrendering judgment to them. They have to accept that an inscription may be meaningful, but not yet readable, structured but not linguistic. partly understood but not solved. The evidence remains incomplete, and good interpretation must keep that incompleteness visible. This discipline becomes especially important because unreadable scripts often belong to cultures whose modern descendants, neighbours or inheritors may care deeply about them. A false decipherment is not just a technical error. It can affect identity, heritage, and the way a society's past is imagined. Claiming that a script belongs to one language family, one migration story, one religious tradition, or one political ancestry can carry modern consequences. That does not mean scholars should avoid difficult conclusions. It means conclusions must be earned. Ancient signs are not empty spaces onto which the present can project itself without responsibility. The strongest protection against false breakthrough is not cynicism but method. A proposed reading should explain the whole corpus as far as possible. It should be clear enough for others to test. It should distinguish secure readings from guesses. It should respect chronology and geography. It should not ignore archaeological context. It should account for sign frequency, order variation, and function. It should produce results that make sense not only as isolated phrases, but as part of an ancient society's actual needs. It should be willing to say less when less is all the evidence allows. This may sound less thrilling than announcing that the mystery has been solved, but in the long run it is more powerful. Restraint keeps the door open for real discovery. It prevents the silence from being filled with noise. It allows the signs to remain what they are, incomplete, but genuine traces of human systems, not raw material for invention. The unreadable language no one can read is already mysterious enough. It does not need hidden kingdoms where none are supported or secret wisdom carved into every mark or modern words forced backward through time. It needs patience equal to the distance it has travelled. So the study moves forward through a landscape of claims, corrections, temptations, and careful refusals. A new reading appears. It is tested. Some parts may hold, others fail. A sign once thought decorative becomes meaningful. A supposed word dissolves into a pattern of damage. A proposed language connection attracts interest, then weakens under scrutiny. A popular theory glows brightly for a season and fades. Through it all, the real inscriptions remain unchanged, waiting beneath each wave of interpretation. They do not reward eagerness alone. They reward evidence, and evidence moves at its own pace. The false breakthrough is in the end another measure of how powerful these signs are. People want them to speak so badly that they sometimes lend them voices too soon. But a borrowed voice is not recovery. It is ventriloquism across centuries. The true task is harder and quieter to listen, without inventing to test, without forcing to accept silence, without surrendering to it. Only then can a future key, if it appears, be recognized for what it is. Only then can the lost language return, not as a fantasy of the present, but as something closer to what ancient hands once meant to preserve. The vanished scribe's world begins with the hand because writing is first a movement before it becomes a mystery. A reed, a stylus, a brush, a blade, a pointed bone, a metal tool or a sharpened stick meets a surface that has been prepared for meaning. Clay is smoothed while still soft. Stone is chosen for durability. A vessel is turned toward the light. A seal is carved in reverse so that its impression will appear correctly when pressed. The person making the mark knows how much pressure to use where the line should begin, when a curve is too wide, when a sign has been damaged, and how much space remains before the edge of the object interrupts the sequence. To modern eyes, the signs are unreadable, but the gestures behind them are not random. They are trained movements from a lost discipline. A scribe does not work alone in the abstract. The scribe belongs to rooms, institutions, and routines. There may be storage jars stacked in shadow baskets of grain, animal hides, cords, tags, ceilings, tablets drying near a wall, vessels waiting for marks, officials waiting for a confirmation, merchants waiting for goods to be released, priests waiting for offerings to be counted, or craftsmen waiting for objects to be approved. Writing enters this world as part of labour. It is not only the work of the mind, it is also the work of posture, eyesight, tool, care, material preparation, and attention to mistakes that may carry consequences. A wrong sign on a ritual object, a mislabeled container, a broken seal, or an unclear name may matter because other people rely on the mark. The training behind such work can only be partly reconstructed. In some literate cultures, students leave practice tablets, repeated exercises, sign lists, copied formulas, or awkward early attempts. In many undeciphered systems, such training evidence is missing or uncertain. Yet the consistency of signs often suggests that people learned from models. They did not invent every mark anew. They followed conventions shared by a group. A young learner may have watched an older hand-copied sequences, memorized the order of signs, practiced on cheap materials, and absorbed rules that no surviving text explains. The evidence remains incomplete, but writing systems rarely sustain themselves without teaching. Behind every repeated sign is not only an individual hand, but a chain of instruction. This chain may have been narrow. Literacy in many ancient societies is not a general condition. It belongs to specialists, officials, priests, traders, rulers, or certain elite households. A village may depend on a single person who can handle marks for storage or exchange. A palace may support a class of trained record keepers. A temple may preserve sacred forms that outsiders cannot use. A merchant family may pass practical literacy across generations. The wider population may recognize the power of signs without producing them. They may know that a sealed jar must not be opened, that a marked object belongs to an institution, that a tablet records obligation, or that a carved symbol carries sacred authority. Reading can be layered. Some know the words, some know the force of the object, some know only that the marks are not to be ignored. The scribe's status depends on the society. In one place the writer may be a respected official, in another a practical worker attached to storerooms, in another a ritual specialist whose knowledge is bound to sacred spaces, in another an artisan who marks products, ownership, or dedications. The word scribe itself may be too narrow for some contexts. The maker of signs might be a potter seal cutter, priest trader, steward, clerk, ruler, or someone whose role does not fit later categories. What survives in the record suggests skilled marking, but not always a profession named by the people themselves. The unreadable language hides the titles of its own users. Imagine a seal cutter at work, though the image must remain grounded in evidence rather than romance. The cutter selects a small hard surface and carves shapes that must function in reverse. The signs may be joined by animal imagery, human figures, geometric patterns, or symbols of office. The result is not simply decorative. When pressed into clay, it becomes an extension of identity. A person may carry the seal at the body, store it carefully, or use it in repeated administrative acts. If the seal includes writing, then the written sign and the image work together. One may name, the other may display. One may identify, the other may intimidate, sanctify, or beautify. Thousands of years later, the impression remains, but the name inside it may still resist reading. Imagine another hand marking a jar before firing. The clay is still workable and the vessel is part of a batch. A sign is pressed or incised near the rim, shoulder base, or handle. It may identify a workshop, capacity owner, destination, or contents. The person making it may not think of the act as historically important. It is a practical mark repeated because the system requires it. Yet if the script later vanishes, this small gesture becomes one of the few surviving clues to the organization of production. The mark may carry less drama than a royal inscription, but it may sit closer to daily life. It shows writing touching the rhythm of craft storage and exchange. Now imagine the more formal setting of a record keeper in an administrative room. Goods have arrived, quantities must be fixed. A sign for a commodity is placed beside numerical marks. A seal is applied. A tablet or tag is set aside to dry. The record may be temporary, meant to serve one season or transaction. It may never be intended for distant descendants. If the building later burns, floods, collapses, or is abandoned, the temporary record can become permanent by accident. This is one of archaeology's strange inversions. The ancient document meant for short-term use may outlast monuments, songs and memories that seemed far more important at the time. Ritual writing may have carried a different atmosphere. A vessel plaque, figurine, stone, or metal object may be marked before deposition in a sacred place. The signs may name a donor, a deity, an offering, a request, a vow, or a formula whose exact meaning remains unknown. The person making the mark may act not only for human readers, but for divine attention. In such context, accuracy may be tied to proper performance. The visible sign becomes part of a relationship between the living, the sacred, and the future. If later readers are lost, the object still shows that meaning was placed deliberately into a charged setting. The silence does not make the act less serious. The scribe's world is also a world of materials, and materials have personalities. Clay invites correction only while soft. After drying or firing, mistakes become stubborn. Stone allows endurance but demands labor and planning. Ink allows speed but often disappears unless conditions are unusually favorable. Metal carries prestige but can be melted and reused. Wood, cloth, leather, bark, and fiber may have held vast amounts of writing now lost. This missing archive haunts every study of undeciphered language. The surviving inscriptions may not show what scribes wrote most often. They show what materials happened to endure. A society may have produced letters, lists, and accounts on perishable surfaces, while modern scholars know it mainly from sealed stones and broken pottery. The vanished scribe's world may therefore be much larger than the surviving signs imply. There is a lesser-known intimacy and mistakes. When a sign is crowded at the end of a line, the writer's judgment of space becomes visible. When a mark is corrected, recut, or squeezed between others, the ancient hand reveals hesitation. When two signs vary across objects, scholars may detect local habits, training differences, chronological change, or individual style. These details do not translate words, but they humanize the system. They show that writing was practiced by people with habits, limits, tools, fatigue, and pressure. A perfectly standardized sign list can make a script feel abstract. The object itself often restores the hand. The people around the scribe also matter. Writing functions because others respond to it. A worker brings goods because a mark orders it. A guard respects a seal because the institution behind it is feared or trusted. A priest accepts an offering because its sign fits a proper category. A merchant recognizes a mark because trade has taught its value. A ruler displays an inscription because viewers understand that written form carries authority. Even those who cannot read participate in the written system by treating the marks as meaningful. The script is social. It lives through obedience, recognition, habit, and belief, not through writing alone. This social life can become fragile. If the institution supporting the scribe weakens, the signs may lose their force before they disappear from memory. A seal from a fallen authority may become decorative. A sacred formula may be copied without full comprehension. A record system may be replaced by another because new rulers demand different habits. A trained writer may teach fewer students because the old work is no longer needed. The script may survive for a time as prestige tradition or relic, then fade. Scholars still debate these processes in many cases because the end of writing is rarely recorded by the writing itself. A script does not usually leave a final note explaining why it has stopped being used. The vanished scribe then is not merely a romantic figure bent over a tablet in dim light. This person stands at the crossing point of memory and institution. The hand makes signs, but the world gives those signs reason to exist. Behind the hand are fields, storehouses, workshops, sanctuaries, courts, households, routes, officials, gods, dead ancestors, and future obligations. The scribe may record quantities, names, titles, offerings, claims, or formulas. The work may be dull, sacred, prestigious, stressful, repetitive, or all of these at once. The lost language hides the words, but the physical act of writing still reveals a disciplined human world. To think of the unreadable script only as a puzzle is to miss this living setting. Each sign is the fossil of an action. Someone selected the surface. Someone prepared the tool. Someone knew the order. Someone expected recognition. Someone made a mark that entered a system of trust-controlled devotion, memory, or display. Later centuries broke the chain, but they did not erase the act. The mark remains as a trace of a body at work inside a society that once knew exactly what it was doing. And perhaps that is why the silence feels so close. The unreadable inscription does not belong to an abstract ancient mind. It belongs to hands like human hands, now steady or hurried, trained or imperfect, working under light, dust, noise, command, habit, and belief. The scribe's voice is gone, but the pressure of the tool remains. The meaning is locked, but the gesture survives. In that gesture, the lost language becomes more than a missing dictionary. It becomes a vanished practice of life, a way of making the world accountable to marks, and a reminder that even when words cannot be recovered, the human effort to preserve them can still be felt across thousands of years. The modern archive does not always look like an archive. Sometimes it looks like a museum drawer lined with foam holding a small broken object that seems too quiet for the weight placed upon it. Sometimes it looks like a climate-controlled room where clay, stone, metal, bone, and ceramic wait under labels written in several modern hands. Sometimes it is a digital database built from photographs, drawings, measurements, excavation notes, old publications, uncertain provenances, and new scans that reveal marks nearly lost to the eye. The ancient script remains unread, but it is no longer alone with guesswork. Science enters the archive not as a sudden miracle, but as a growing set of ways to see, measure, compare, and protect what earlier generations could only describe by hand. The first change is often light. Many inscriptions are not bold carvings preserved in perfect relief. They are shallow scratches, worn impressions, damaged cuts, faint pigment traces, compressed ceilings, or signs hidden beneath corrosion and dirt. Ordinary viewing can flatten them into ambiguity. A line may disappear or change shape depending on the angle of illumination. Raking light can make a faint incision stand out. Infrared imaging may reveal pigment invisible to the naked eye. Ultraviolet light may separate surface treatments from later stains. Reflectance, transformation imaging can capture how a surface responds to light from many directions, allowing scholars to examine minute details without touching the object again and again. The result is not translation, but it can clarify whether a mark is intentional, how deep it is, and where one sign ends and another begins. Three-dimensional scanning adds another layer. A seal impression, for example, is not simply an image. It is a landscape of tiny ridges and depressions formed by pressure, material, tool, and wear. A high-resolution model can preserve that landscape in ways that a flat photograph cannot. It can show the angle of a cut, the sequence of strokes, the deformation of clay, or the damage caused after deposition. It can allow researchers in different countries to inspect the same object without moving it from its collection. It can even help compare impressions made by the same seal, identifying the authority or individual behind repeated marks. The evidence remains incomplete, but the surface itself becomes more readable as an object even when the signs remain unreadable as language. Material analysis can also reshape the story. The clay of a tablet or ceiling may reveal where it was made, or at least where its raw material likely came from. The stone of an inscription can be traced to a quarry or region. The metal of a marked object may carry chemical signatures of ore sources, recycling, or trade. Pigments can reveal technological choices and connections across craft traditions. Residue inside marked vessels may show what they once held. Such evidence does not tell scholars what the signs say, but it tells them where the object belongs in the movement of materials. A mysterious mark on a jar becomes more meaningful if the jar carried oil, wine grain resin, or perfume across a known route. A seal impression becomes more important if the clay came from a distant administrative centre, rather than the place where it was found. Dating methods offer another kind of discipline. A script cannot be understood properly if its time is misplaced. Radiocarbon dating of associated organic material, stratigraphic analysis, thermoluminescence in some ceramics, and careful comparison of pottery styles, architecture and settlement layers can place inscriptions within a chronological frame. This matters because scripts change, languages change, political systems rise and fall. A sign that appears early in one region and later in another may suggest spread, imitation, migration, exchange, or administrative influence. A sudden disappearance may align with destruction, abandonment, environmental stress, or institutional change, though no single explanation fully accounts for such endings. Without chronology, every interpretation floats. With chronology, the silence begins to have a history. Computational study has become one of the most visible modern tools, but it works best when treated carefully. Databases can count sign frequency across hundreds or thousands of inscriptions. They can test whether certain signs cluster together more often than chance would suggest. They can compare sequence length, positional habits, and patterns known from other writing systems. They can model whether a corpus behaves more like writing notation, symbolic marking, or a mixture. This kind of analysis is powerful because the human eye can be seduced by memorable examples, while computation can force attention toward the whole body of evidence. Yet the computer does not know the ancient language. It can detect structure, not meaning. It can show that signs behave in ordered ways, but it cannot by itself decide whether the order belongs to grammar, accounting, ritual ownership, or visual convention. The danger of modern tools is that they can make uncertainty look more exact than it is. A statistical chart can appear authoritative even when the dataset is small, uneven, or filled with uncertain sign readings. A digital reconstruction can make a damaged inscription look complete, even if part of it depends on interpretation. A machine learning model may group signs by shape, but ancient scribes may have treated similar-looking marks as distinct or different-looking variants as the same sign. Technology sharpens evidence. It does not remove the need for human judgment. Scholars still have to ask how an object was made where it was found, whether it is complete, whether the transcription is reliable, and whether the proposed pattern makes archaeological sense. Conservation science also matters because the future of decipherment depends on preserving the evidence without damaging it. Earlier generations sometimes cleaned, restored, inked, handled, or displayed objects in ways that modern conservators would avoid. A faint inscription can be damaged by aggressive cleaning. A fragile ceiling can crumble under pressure. A metal object can corrode if stored poorly. A painted mark can fade under light. Conservation is not glamorous compared with the announcement of a possible reading, but it may determine whether future scholars have anything left to read. The missing key, if it ever appears, may require comparing signs across objects that are today considered minor. Every fragment has to survive long enough to become useful. The modern archive is also shaped by older mistakes. Many objects entered museums before careful excavation records became standard. Some were purchased without reliable provenance. Others were removed from sites during early expeditions when the location of each find was recorded only broadly, if at all. Looted artifacts are especially damaging because they separate inscriptions from the layers, buildings, and associated objects that could have helped explain them. A beautiful object without context can attract attention, but it is historically wounded. Its signs may be real, yet the story around them has been torn away. Science can measure its material and image its surface, but it cannot always restore the lost find spot, the neighbouring objects, or the exact circumstances of deposition. This has changed how many archaeologists approach new discoveries. The object is not treated as a treasure first, but as a piece of evidence inside a system. Its position in the ground, orientation, depth surrounding soil, nearby artifacts, traces of burning relation to walls or floors, and association with organic remains can all matter. A marked object found in a sealed destruction layer carries a different meaning from one found in mixed fill. A ceiling near a doorway suggests a different life from a similar ceiling in a rubbish deposit. A tablet on a floor may preserve abandonment or accident. One in a later fill may have been displaced. The unreadable text becomes more informative when its entire archaeological context is preserved. Digital reunification is one of the quieter revolutions. Fragments scattered across collections can sometimes be compared and virtually joined. Inscriptions published in obscure reports can be brought into searchable databases. Photographs taken decades apart can be aligned. Old drawings can be checked against new images. Objects from different museums can be studied together without physically moving them. This matters greatly for undeciphered scripts because small corpora suffer from fragmentation. A sign that seems rare in one collection may appear frequently when materials are combined. A sequence thought isolated may belong to a wider pattern. A broken object may match another fragment far away. The archive grows not only through excavation but through reconnection. There is a lesser-known emotional shift in this work. The mystery language no one can read once depended heavily on the eye of an individual scholar, leaning over a drawing or object. That eye still matters, but now it joins a broader ecology of specialists. Archaeologists, epigraphers, linguists, conservators, imaging experts, materials scientists, statisticians, database builders, climate researchers, and local heritage professionals may all contribute to the same problem. Each sees a different part of the evidence. One understands sign variation, another understands clay sourcing, another reads settlement patterns, another reconstructs trade networks, another protects the artifact from decay. Decipherment, if it comes, may not belong to a single heroic figure. It may emerge from cooperation across many forms of patience. Scientific methods can also challenge older stories about the societies behind the signs. A script once assumed to be local may appear on materials imported from afar. A supposed isolated culture may prove deeply connected through trade goods and shared technologies. A marked object found in a region may have been made elsewhere, complicating claims about language and identity. Ancient DNA and isotope studies used carefully can reveal movement of people, diet, and ancestry, though they cannot simply identify language by themselves. Climate and environmental studies can show pressures that shaped settlement and administration. The unreadable script becomes part of a wider web of evidence about mobility, contact resilience, and change. Even with all of this, science does not abolish mystery. It refines it. It may show that a mark is definitely intentional, yet not what it means. It may prove that two objects came from the same workshop, yet not who owned them. It may reveal that a sequence repeats across sites, yet not how it sounded. It may date a script's use more precisely while leaving its language unknown. This refined uncertainty is valuable. It replaces vague wonder with sharper questions. It tells scholars where the limits truly are. It shows which paths are promising and which are illusions. The silence becomes less foggy even if it remains unbroken. There is also humility in the fact that future tools may see what the present cannot. Inscriptions considered unreadable today may contain pigment traces that later imaging can recover. Damaged tablets may be virtually unwrapped or reconstructed with techniques not yet common. Databases may grow large enough for more reliable pattern analysis. Newly excavated objects may provide the missing context for old fragments. A bilingual text may still be buried, but it may also be sitting in a drawer under an old classification waiting for someone to recognize its significance. Modern science teaches that the archive is not fixed. It changes as methods change, yet technology must always return to the ancient hand. Beneath every scan spectrum model and dataset is the original act of marking. A person pressed, cut, painted, incised, or stamped a sign because it mattered in a living world. The machine can magnify the gesture, but it cannot replace the historical question. Who needed this mark? Who recognized it? What institution supported it? What material carried it? Why did this object survive when so much else disappeared? These questions keep the study human. They prevent the lost language from becoming merely a technical puzzle. As science enters the archive, the unreadable signs do not become less mysterious. They become more exact in their mystery. The crack is measured, the clay is sourced, the mark is illuminated, the sequence is counted, the object is placed more carefully in time and space. This silence is no longer a blank silence. It is a mapped silence surrounded by data context and disciplined restraint. Each new method adds a lamp to the room, and under those lamps the signs remain, still refusing to speak, but now refusing with greater clarity. The mystery language waits within this modern web of light numbers surfaces, and care not as a relic, abandoned by time, but as an active question carried forward by every generation that learns to look a little more closely. What the silence protects is not only a set of words, it protects an entire interior life that archaeology can approach but not fully enter. A settlement can be mapped, a burial can be described, a vessel can be dated, a skeleton can be studied, and a trade route can be reconstructed from materials carried across long distances. These things are powerful. They make the lost world visible again in outline and texture. But language gives people their own categories for that world. It names what they fear, what they honor, what they measure, what they owe, what they inherit, and what they believe they are becoming. When the script remains unreadable, those categories remain behind a wall. The ancient people are present through their actions, but absent from their own explanations. The silence protects belief most deeply. Sacred objects can be recognized by context, placement, repetition, and care. A figurine deposited in a sanctuary, a vessel placed in a burial, a stone set apart from ordinary use, a painted symbol repeated in ritual settings, or a structure aligned with seasonal light may suggest religious meaning. Yet without readable words, the inner vocabulary of belief remains uncertain. A sign may name a deity, an ancestor, a spirit, a place of power, a festival, a vow, or an offering category. It may mark purity, protection, dedication, ownership by a temple, or the memory of the dead. The evidence remains incomplete because ritual is often visible in action, but difficult to translate into thought. Archaeology can show that people performed acts with care. It cannot always tell us what those acts meant to them. This matters because ancient religion is not only myth or ceremony. It can organize time, land, labor, authority, ancestry, healing, death, and exchange. A temple or sacred center may control stores of food, employ craftspeople, receive goods, maintain calendars, and legitimize rulers. A ritual inscription may therefore hold practical information and sacred force together. If the writing cannot be read, the relationship between the divine and the administrative remains partly hidden. A jar in a sanctuary might be an offering, a ration, a tax, or a sacred commodity moving through an economic system. A seal might mark a priest, a household, a god, or an official office. No single explanation fully accounts for these objects without the missing words that once clarified their role. The silence also protects political language. Archaeology can reveal hierarchy through architecture. Rich graves controlled storage, defensive walls, standardized goods, and monumental construction. It can show that some people had more access to labor materials and display than others. But unreadable writing hides the titles, offices, claims, and ideologies of power. It hides whether a leader called himself king, chief steward, priest, servant of a god master of a city, descendant of an ancestor, or something that has no easy modern equivalent. It hides whether authority was inherited, elected, conquered, ritualized, shared, or negotiated. Material remains can suggest patterns of power, but the language of power often reveals how power wanted to be understood. This missing political vocabulary affects even the names of places. A ruined settlement may have a modern archaeological name drawn from a nearby village, landscape feature, excavation history, or later tradition. The people who lived there may have called it something entirely different. A river, a district, a harbour, a mountain, a palace, or a sanctuary may have carried names with histories now locked inside signs. Place names are not simple labels. They can preserve memory of founders, gods, landscapes, ethnic groups, resources, myths, or political claims. Without them, maps become partly mute. The landscape can be reconstructed physically, but its ancient human naming remains uncertain. The silence protects movement too. Migration and contact can be traced through pottery styles, burial customs, house forms, tools, isotopes, ancient DNA, and imported materials, though each line of evidence must be handled carefully. People move in many ways: conquest, marriage, trade, seasonal labor, pilgrimage, refuge, alliance, enslavement, colonization, and gradual diffusion of habits. But language often records how communities understood movement. Did they describe newcomers as foreigners, relatives, captives, traders, allies, enemies, guests, or people from a named land beyond the horizon? Did they preserve memories of arrival, departure, or origin? Did they borrow words for new goods, titles, gods, or technologies? Unreadable texts may contain such traces, but until they can be read, the human meanings of movement remain blurred. Daily life is also protected by the silence, not because daily life leaves no material evidence, but because objects cannot easily reveal the words people used among themselves. Grinding stones show food preparation. Loom weights suggest textile production. Hearths show cooking. Tools show tasks. Animal bones and plant remains show diet. Houses show household organization. But the names for foods, kinship roles, work Obligations, jokes, insults, blessings, illnesses, and childhood lessons remain unknown. The ordinary vocabulary of a society is often the most intimate part of it. It may never have been written much, even when the script was alive. If it was written, it may survive only in signs no one can read. What survives in the record suggests routines, but not the spoken texture that made those routines human. The silence protects inequality as well. Written records in early societies often concern control goods, labour land, tribute rations, offerings and offices. If an undeciphered corpus contains administrative texts, it may hold evidence of who worked, who paid, who received, who commanded, and who was counted. But without reading the details remain hidden. Were labourers recorded by name, group, household, gender, age, occupation, or status? Were goods redistributed fairly ceremonially, coercively, or through systems now difficult to classify? Did the writing system serve a palace, temple, merchant class, or local community? Archaeology can show storage and difference. The unread text may contain the sharper edge of obligation. There is a lesser-known difficulty in the way silence protects social categories. Modern labels such as ruler, priest, merchant, worker, slave, noble, foreigner, farmer, artisan, and citizen may not fit neatly. Ancient societies often organize identity through categories that do not map well onto later terms. A person may be defined by household lineage, temple, service, debt, status, craft, ritual, purity, military role, age, grade, clan, residence, or relation to a specific institution. If the script could be read, it might reveal words that alter the entire social picture. Without those words, scholars must infer categories from objects and spaces. Those inferences can be strong, but they remain partial. The silence also protects emotion, though traces of emotion still appear in material form. Careful burial suggests grief, duty, or belief in continuing ties with the dead. Repaired objects suggest attachment, scarcity, or practical value. Offerings suggest hope, fear, gratitude, obligation, or social display. Defensive walls suggest danger, authority, or competition. Abandonment layers suggest disruption, though not always panic. Yet the direct language of feeling rarely survives without readable texts. A dedication might express gratitude. A tomb inscription might name a beloved relation. A record might preserve a personal name that restores individuality. A curse, blessing, plea, or oath may lie inside a sequence that currently appears only as signs. The emotional life of the civilization is present in gestures, but its own words remain guarded. This guardedness can be frustrating, but it also prevents false intimacy. It reminds modern people that the past is not automatically available. Ancient communities are not characters waiting to be completed by imagination. They are real human worlds with boundaries set by evidence. When their language is unreadable, there is a duty not to fill their silence too easily. Scholars can describe what is known, infer what is likely, and explain what remains uncertain. The silence protects the dead from some forms of modern overconfidence. It refuses to let every object become a story beyond what the evidence can bear. At the same time, silence can conceal connections that would enrich history. A readable inscription might show that a society known from local artifacts was part of a wider diplomatic world. It might reveal names of neighbouring peoples, records of trade memories of conflict, borrowed religious terms, or administrative titles shaped by foreign influence. It might show that a supposedly isolated script belonged to a multilingual environment. It might reveal that the people behind the signs called themselves by a name preserved elsewhere in distorted form. It might connect fragments of history that currently sit in separate fields of study. The unreadable language may protect not only secrets, but relationships. The silence also protects endings. When a writing system disappears, the texts that could explain its decline are often missing, damaged, or unreadable. Archaeology may show abandoned buildings, changing pottery, reduced trade, altered burial customs, destruction layers, new settlement patterns, or environmental stress. But the voices describing those changes are absent. Did people perceive their world as collapsing, reforming, adapting, or simply changing under pressure? Did scribes know the old system was fading? Did rulers attempt reforms? Did communities migrate voluntarily or under force? Did religious change transform the use of signs? Scholars still debate these questions in many cases because material evidence can show transformation without revealing how it was experienced. This is one of the deepest losses. Collapse, transition, and disappearance are not the same from the inside as they appear from the outside. A later archaeologist may see a break in occupation, a burned layer, a shift in ceramics, or the end of inscriptions. People living through the change may have seen failed harvests, political disputes, new taxes, strange weather raids, marriages across groups, the arrival of foreign officials, the loss of old rituals, or the slow irrelevance of scribal training. The unread texts may have once recorded some part of this transition. They may have named crisis in terms we cannot know, or they may have recorded only routine matters while the larger transformation unfolded around them. The evidence remains incomplete either way. What the silence protects, then, is not a single secret. It is the difference between an observed civilization and a self-described one. Archaeology can watch people build, bury trade store, travel, and mark. It can reconstruct diets, environments, technologies, contacts, and sometimes biological histories. But unreadable writing withholds the words that would reveal how people classified their world. It withholds their own names for authority, sacredness, kinship, duty, landscape, memory, and loss. It withholds the possibility of hearing them argue, command, dedicate, count, mourn, boast, or simply label a jar in their own terms. Yet this protection is not absolute. Every new fragment weakens it slightly. Every careful excavation, scan, comparison, and context study presses against the boundary. A repeated sign beside a certain object type may expose a category. A seal impression found across several sites may reveal an institution. A number system may show economic scale. A future bilingual text may open names and titles. The silence is strong but not invulnerable. It is a door held shut by missing evidence, and evidence can change. Until then, the unreadable signs remain guardians of a vanished interior. They allow the outline of civilization to be seen while keeping its language folded inward. They show that people organized memory, but not exactly how they named memory. They show that authority existed, but not always what authority called itself. They show that offerings were made, but not always to whom. They show that objects moved, but not always under what obligations. They show that the dead were remembered, but not always with which words. The mystery is not only that a language cannot be read, it is that an entire human world stands so close to speech and still keeps its deepest meanings just beyond the reach of the present. The legacy of unreadable words begins in the place where knowledge reaches its limit and does not end. A script that cannot be read still changes archaeology because it changes the way the past is approached. It forces scholars to move more carefully, to ask what can be known without translation, to separate evidence from desire, and to accept that some of the most important traces of human intelligence may remain only partly accessible. The unreadable inscription is not a failure of history. It is one of history's surviving forms. It stands as proof that people once built systems of memory strong enough to endure in material, yet fragile enough to lose their meaning when the living chain broke. This legacy is visible in museums where mysterious signs often draw the eye more quickly than objects that can be fully explained. A polished label may say that the script remains undeciphered and that single word carries an unusual force. It makes the object feel unfinished, not because the ancient makers failed, but because modern understanding has not caught up with survival. Visitors may stand before a small seal, tablet, plaque vessel or stone and feel the strange pressure of almost recognition. The signs look purposeful. They seem to belong to language. They seem to be waiting. That waiting becomes part of the artifact's power. The object does not merely display a lost culture, it displays the boundary of what can currently be known about that culture. For archaeologists, unreadable writing creates a disciplined discomfort. It refuses the simple confidence that texts sometimes provide. In a society with readable archives, a king may name himself, a law may define an office, a treaty may identify enemies, a receipt may record exact quantities, and a hymn may reveal divine language. Such texts can also mislead, exaggerate, omit, and serve elite interests, but they offer direct claims that can be tested against material evidence. In a society whose script remains unread, those claims are missing. The ground must be read more slowly. Architecture, settlement pattern, burial practice, environmental evidence, and object distribution carry heavier responsibility. The silence reshapes the entire method. This reshaping has consequences for how civilizations are compared. Cultures with readable texts often seem more historically vivid, not necessarily because they were more complex, but because their own records survive in accessible form. Cultures with unreadable or unwritten traditions may be equally rich, yet they appear more distant through the accidents of preservation and decipherment. This creates an imbalance in public imagination. A society that can name its kings in a readable script may dominate history books, while another with cities' tradecraft specialization and ritual systems remains described through pottery styles and site names. The difference is not simply importance, it is recoverability. The evidence remains incomplete, and modern history often reflects the uneven survival of voices. Unreadable words also shape cultural identity. Ancient scripts may belong to regions where modern communities see deep ancestral significance, even when direct lines of descent are complex, layered, or debated. The signs can become symbols of local heritage, national memory, or regional pride. They may appear in art education, tourism, public monuments, and cultural debates. This can be meaningful and legitimate, especially when communities seek to protect and honor ancient remains. But it can also become difficult when uncertain scripts are pulled into modern political claims too quickly. A proposed decipherment may be welcomed or resisted not only because of evidence, but because of what it seems to imply about origin, identity, language, and belonging. Scholars must move carefully because the past is never only past. The public imagination often loves unreadable scripts because they offer mystery without needing invention. The real situation is already powerful. A sign system exists. It was made by human beings. It once worked. It no longer can be read. That alone is enough to stir the mind. Yet popular culture sometimes adds layers of secrecy, conspiracy, or supernatural explanation where none is needed. The unknown becomes a stage for hidden wisdom, forbidden histories, or impossible contact. These stories may be dramatic, but they usually flatten the ancient society behind the signs. They replace difficult human history with spectacle. The true mystery is subtler and stronger. Ordinary people created systems of meaning that outlasted their world but not their readers. This subtler mystery has a long influence on how people think about civilization itself. It shows that civilization is not preserved by monuments alone. It is preserved by transmission. A city can stand in ruins, but if its language, institutions, stories and names are lost, much of its inner life goes with them. Writing may seem like protection against forgetting, but undeciphered scripts prove that writing is only one part of protection. The signs must continue to be taught. The language must continue to be spoken or studied. The institutions that value the script must survive, or later communities must choose to preserve it. Without that chain, even carved stone can become mute. There is a lesser-known humility in this realization. Modern societies produce an overwhelming quantity of writing stored in books, servers, archives, messages, databases, labels, contracts, images, and code. It is tempting to believe that such abundance guarantees memory. Ancient unreadable scripts warn otherwise. Media decay. Formats become obsolete. Languages change. Institutions fail. Context disappears. A file without readable software is not entirely different from a tablet without a living script tradition. A database without metadata can become a future ruin. The problem of lost language is not only ancient, it is a deep human problem, meaning survives only when someone preserves not just the marks, but the knowledge needed to use them. For archaeology, unreadable scripts have also encouraged collaboration across fields. They cannot be solved by epigraphy alone, or linguistics alone, or excavation alone. A sign sequence must be tied to material, place chronology, object type, and comparative context. A possible reading must make sense inside trade networks, ritual settings, administrative structures, and language history. This has pushed research toward more integrated methods, where the study of writing becomes part of a larger reconstruction of life. The unreadable text does not sit apart from pottery seeds, bones, architecture, residue, climate records, or movement patterns. It sits among them. Its silence invites the other evidence to speak more fully. The legacy is also pedagogical. Undeciphered scripts teach the public how historical knowledge is actually made. They show that archaeology is not simply the discovery of objects, but the slow construction of reliable interpretation. They demonstrate why context matters, why looting destroys knowledge, why old drawings must be checked, why dating matters, why claims need testing, and why uncertainty is not weakness. A good museum display or documentary about an unreadable script can reveal the discipline's patience. It can show that not knowing is not the end of inquiry, but the beginning of better questions. At the same time, these scripts preserve wonder within scholarship. Careful research does not destroy awe, it deepens it. Knowing how hard a script is to decipher makes each surviving sign more remarkable. Understanding the limits of the evidence makes the original act of writing feel more human, not less. The mystery is not a fog covering ignorance. It is a sharp-edged absence surrounded by real information. Scholars may know the age of an object, the material of its surface, the tool that cut the marks, the building where it was found, the trade routes of its region, and the environmental pressures of its time, while still not knowing what the signs say. That combination of knowledge and silence is unusually powerful. The unreadable word also affects the way vanished cultures are remembered in narrative. A culture with no readable text can be described through landscape movement, collapse objects, and atmosphere, but its story often remains more open-ended. This openness can be frustrating for those who want clean answers, yet it may also be more honest. Many human lives are not preserved as complete stories. They survive as fragments, traces, habits, and interruptions. An unreadable script makes this condition visible. It reminds modern audiences that history is not a finished book with missing pages waiting neatly to be restored. It is a field of damaged evidence where some pages may never have survived at all, and others survive in a language that no one can yet enter. The legacy of unreadable words reaches into ethics as well. Ancient inscriptions should not be treated only as puzzles to be solved. They are cultural heritage. They may belong to landscapes, communities, and descendants whose relationship to them is not merely academic. Their preservation depends on responsible excavation, local stewardship, legal protection, and respect for context. A looted inscription may look like a clue, but it arrives damaged in the most important way, stripped from its archaeological surroundings. A fragment sold as an object of mystery has often lost the very information that could have helped explain it. The desire to possess the past can destroy the possibility of understanding it. This ethical dimension is part of the broader legacy because unreadable scripts remind people that the past is finite. There are not infinite chances to recover meaning. A site destroyed by construction, war, looting, erosion, or careless excavation may take with it the context needed for future decipherment. A small marked shard discarded as unimportant might have carried a rare sign. A seal impression separated from its layer might lose its date and function. The future recovery of lost languages depends on decisions made now by excavators, collectors, governments, museums, and local communities. The missing key may exist, but it must survive the present in order to help the future. And yet, despite all these limits, unreadable scripts continue to generate hope. Their very persistence suggests that the story is not closed. Every new excavation season, every improved imaging technique, every database update, every careful re-examination of an old object can shift the balance slightly. A sign once thought rare may become common. A sequence once isolated may find a match. A fragment may join another. A context may clarify a function. A bilingual or parallel text may appear where no one expected it. The fact that some scripts have been deciphered in the past keeps the possibility alive for others, even when patience must be measured in generations. The legacy of unreadable words is therefore not only silence but a form of unfinished relationship. The ancient writers made marks for their own world, not for ours, yet those marks now bind the present to them through curiosity and care. Modern scholars cannot fully read the messages, but they can protect them, document them, study their settings, challenge false claims, and prepare for the chance that future evidence will open them. The public cannot hear the lost language, but it can learn to respect the difference between mystery and invention. Museums cannot translate every object, but they can show why uncertainty matters. In the end, unreadable writing becomes one of the clearest symbols of the fragility of civilization. It shows achievement and loss in the same line of signs. It shows a society capable of fixing meaning into material and time capable of separating that material from meaning. It shows that memory is not a possession, but a chain. When the chain holds, the dead can speak with startling clarity. When it breaks, even their written words become shadows of speech. The legacy of the mystery language no one can read lies in that tension the signs endure. The voice is absent, and the present is left with the responsibility to study the silence without distorting it. The missing key may already exist somewhere in the world, but not yet as a key. It may lie in a museum drawer under an old label, recorded as a minor fragment of pottery or a damaged seal. It may sit in a storeroom where thousands of objects wait for full publication, each one wrapped, numbered, and quietly separated from the moment of discovery by years of backlog. It may be part of a private collection stripped of context, and therefore weakened, yet still carrying signs that could matter. It may remain under soil behind a collapsed wall, beneath a later settlement, inside a sealed deposit, or in the fill of a building whose importance has not yet been recognized. It may have been destroyed centuries ago, burned, reused, ground, down, melted, or washed away. The search continues under all these possibilities, because unreadable languages live in the space between loss and chance. Every new fragment has the potential to alter the problem. A short inscription may add a rare sign. A repeated sequence may confirm that an earlier reading direction was correct. A ceiling may connect two administrative buildings. A marked vessel may show that a script spread farther than expected. A tablet found in secure context may tie the signs to a precise period, a particular institution, or a sudden collapse. A single bilingual phrase, if it ever appears, could change the entire field. But most discoveries do not transform everything at once. They shift the edges, they clarify a sign form, they correct a catalogue, they extend a distribution map, they make one explanation slightly stronger and another slightly weaker. This is how the waiting usually ends, not with a thunderclap, but with a series of small pressures against the locked door. The future of decipherment depends as much on preservation as on brilliance. A key cannot be recognized if it is damaged beyond study, removed from context, or lost into the market before its find spot is recorded. The careful excavation of ordinary places may matter more than the hunt for spectacular monuments. Storerooms, rubbish pits, workshop floors, harbour deposits, domestic spaces, administrative rooms and sanctuary edges can preserve the short routine marks that reveal how a script worked in daily life. A royal inscription might attract attention, but a humble tag beside a counted commodity might provide the repeated structure that scholars need. The ancient world often hides its most useful evidence in the places modern imagination finds least dramatic. Waiting for the missing key also means waiting for better questions. Earlier generations often approached undeciphered scripts with the hope of finding king's myths or grand historical announcements. Those may exist, but modern research asks wider questions. What surfaces were used? Which signs appear on which materials? Who had access to writing? How far did the script travel? Did it belong to trade, ritual, administration, identity, or several of these at once? Did it change across time? Did it coexist with other languages or scripts? Did its disappearance reflect collapse, replacement, reform, or the loss of a narrow institution? The evidence remains incomplete, but the questions have become more precise, and precision makes future breakthroughs more likely to be understood correctly. There is a strange patience in this work because the people who made the signs are beyond urgency. They no longer need the jar delivered. The offering counted, the seal respected, the name recognized, or the order obeyed. Their practical world has passed. The urgency belongs to the present, to the desire not to let the surviving evidence decay into another layer of loss. Archaeologists work against erosion, looting, war development, climate damage, poor storage, and the fading of older records. Conservators work against corrosion, cracking, fading, and careless handling. Scholars work against false certainty and forgetfulness. The unreadable language waits, but the objects carrying it do not wait safely unless people protect them. The present may also be closer to a breakthrough than it knows. Many decipherments in history appear inevitable only after they happen. Before that moment, the evidence can seem scattered, confusing, insufficient, or wrongly framed. A known name may be overlooked because no one expects it in that place. A sign may be misclassified for decades. A fragment may remain unpublished. A bilingual object may be recognized only after one of its scripts is better understood. A computational pattern may become meaningful only when tied to a newly excavated context. The missing key is not always a single thing. It can be a convergence of many things that separately seem too small. Still, it is possible that some scripts will never be fully read. This is not defeatism, but respect for the record. If the corpus is too small, if the language has no known relatives, if no bilingual text survives, if the surviving inscriptions are too short or formulaic, full decipherment may remain beyond reach. Scholars may identify numbers, functions, directions, names, or probable titles without ever recovering fluent reading. The mystery may narrow, but not disappear. Such an outcome can feel disappointing, yet partial knowledge is still knowledge. To understand that a sign marks a commodity, that a seal belongs to administration, that a script spread through maritime trade, or that an inscription is likely a dedication can change the history of a civilization even without every word being known. The possibility of permanent silence gives the surviving marks a different kind of dignity. They are not failures awaiting correction. They are remnants of human systems that no longer owe the present full disclosure. The ancient writers did not write for modern scholars. They wrote for their own readers, gods, officials, traders, families, institutions, and dead. The fact that their signs reached a distant future is an accident of material survival, not a promise that everything would be understood. This recognition does not reduce the desire to decipher, it tempers it. It reminds the present that the past is not an open archive but a damaged inheritance. And yet the desire remains because the signs themselves keep inviting it. They repeat too carefully to be ignored. They sit on objects too deliberately to be dismissed. They appear in places where human need gathers storerooms, tombs, sanctuaries, workshops, routes of exchange, centers of power. They carry the shape of intention. To look at them is to sense that meaning was once near the surface. The marks are not silent in the way a blank stone is silent. They are silent in the way a locked door is silent with space behind it. What might be found if the door opens cannot be known in advance. The first readings may be modest names of officials, lists of goods, records of offerings, vessel labels, ownership marks, short dedications, titles, numbers, measures, place names. They may not reveal hidden philosophy or lost prophecy. They may reveal something better grounded and more valuable, the working vocabulary of a vanished world. The name of a city, the title of a woman or man who held office, the word for a sacred offering, a measure of grain, a god worshipped in a small sanctuary, a merchant's seal, a dead person's identity preserved on an object placed beside the body. These are not small things. They are the threads from which historical life is woven. If a fuller reading ever comes, it may also change the questions asked of the material record. Buildings once interpreted as palaces may turn out to have different names or functions. Objects classified as ritual may prove administrative, or administrative objects may prove sacred. Trade routes may gain named places. Social ranks may become clearer. A culture known by an archaeological label may recover one of its own words for itself. But the result may also complicate more than it solves. Texts may contradict archaeological expectations. They may reveal multilingualism, shifting authority, or categories that do not fit modern terms. A deciphered language does not end mystery. It makes mystery more specific. Until then, the waiting continues in many forms. It continues in excavation trenches where soil is removed slowly and every marked fragment is recorded before it moves. It continues in laboratories where surfaces are scanned under changing light. It continues in databases where signs from distant collections are brought together. It continues in debates over whether a mark is a sign, whether a sign is a word, whether a word belongs to a language, and whether a proposed reading can survive another test. It continues in the quiet refusal to fill silence with easy answers. Patience becomes part of the method. The missing key is therefore not only an object, it is also a discipline of attention. It is the willingness to protect context, to re-examine old material, to admit uncertainty, to compare carefully, to reject attractive claims when they fail, and to leave room for future evidence. It is the recognition that the unreadable language is not dead in the same way a vanished settlement is dead. It still produces questions, it still shapes research, it still gathers people around the attempt to understand. Its silence is active. The story that began with a small mark on an ancient surface ends for now with that same kind of mark still waiting. A line in clay, a cluster of signs on stone, a seal impressed by a hand that trusted others to recognize it, a vessel marked before it moved through a world of goods, obligations, and belief. Each object carries a message across time but stops just short of speech. The ancient reader is gone. The modern reader has not yet arrived. Between them stands the sign itself, durable, patient, and incomplete. Somewhere in that gap lies the mystery language no one can read, still holding its shape, still keeping its voice, still waiting for the missing key.